I'm going to read your thoughts. Let's see now. You come here from a great distance?
Yeah, exactly.
Don't tell me. You want me to buy a subscription to the Saturday Evening Post?
No.
Not a word now. Quiet. Donations. You want me to make a donation to the Coast Guard Youth Auxiliary?
Doc, I'm from the future. I came here in a time machine that you invented. Now I need your help to get back to the year 1985.
Do you expect me to talk?
Hello and welcome to episode 97 of Do You Expect Us to Talk? I'm your host Becca and I'm joined as always by fellow co-hosts Chris Byrne and Dave Bond, and together we are your density. Your destiny. Anyway, how are you?
That's heavy.
Good evening, folks.
Why is everything in this era heavy?
It's something to do with the Earth's gravitational pull.
You know, the funny thing is, though, like, for years, that joke just went over my head. I didn't even know it existed in the film until I saw it,
I suspect the population of the world was lower, therefore not weighing the Earth down as much, therefore it was spinning faster, therefore gravity was higher, therefore everyone was heavier.
Yeah,
that's fun, folks.
Science with Dave.
Yeah, science might be overstating it somewhat.
That's our new segment for the show.
Dave
does science.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that before I started talking, so don't get too excited.
Suddenly, like, randomly find out you're a maths genius, and you're like, Jesus Christ.
Do you know what? If I get some email now from some fucking PhD guy, actually, I know you were joking, but that's actually bang on. Yeah.
It's like when you suddenly discover a gift where you just like know everything. All you need to do is just like sort of just start talking and start as if you know what you're talking about. It just magically becomes like the right answer, whatever it is.
Yeah. So
Anyway, folks, as if you haven't gathered so far, we enter a new chapter in this podcast series as we review the Back to the Future series.
Great Scott.
Marty. I'm very excited. This doesn't sound really weird. It is one of my favourite films, but it's not my favourite film of all time. But it is probably one of
what is your favourite?
The greatest films ever made.
Just out of.
I have two from a list of two, so I've got
Dirty Dancing and What Women Want.
Yeah, this is it. I've got like socially acceptable list, and
the other one's just porn.
The other one's just cringe. But no, I think it's one of those movies.
She doesn't want to answer it, does she?
It's Buttman's anal adventure, isn't it?
Leprechaun in the Hood, surely.
Go on, what is it?
Jurassic Park. Don't laugh.
Oh God, yeah. Like, you must love me then, because I'm a major Jurassic Park detractor.
Yeah, we'll come to it when we come to the review, if we come to review.
Yeah, no.
Why are you finding Jurassic Park embarrassing?
I don't think it's embarrassing. It was a huge hit.
No, it's massively successful. I just think because it was that time
really
when no, it sort of came to me sort of in I just sort of discovered it.
I mean, I might think it's lesser to those films, but how is it any different from having like Raiders or E.T. as your favourite?
Spielberg. What are you going to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's lesser than those, but that's just me.
No, I think I enjoy it more for personal reasons, and for becoming interested in that kind of
You used to date a Diplodocus, didn't you?
Actually, he was a raptor, but
Yeah. She thought it was a rapper on the dating profile. Turned out to be a misprint.
He's a raptor. Oh.
I just thought,
That's
He had
what that
such short
claw's
arms he
for.
couldn't feed himself. So they bonded over Here Comes the Aeroplane.
Rather than Dippy.
Yeah.
Think of him like.
Why did they
Pigtail.
call him? Hey, why did they call him Dippy?
Don't know. Why did they call him Dippy?
I thought maybe there was some sort of behavioural quirk he had.
Oh, no, I thought that was a joke. I thought you were setting up some kind of.
I was setting up some filth. Never mind. Carry on.
Yeah, so
Like,
is it, what your favourite film was Jurassic Park? What's the other one, or what's the cringy one?
No, I think that was the cringy one.
Yeah,
Wasn't
that was the cringy one.
Why is that? Why is that cringy?
Which is the respected one then?
No, there's Hitchcock Psycho. I think it's really cool. I do like it a lot.
It's at least my 7th favourite Hitchcock film.
Then closely followed by On Her Majesty's Secret Service, so it's alright.
Psycho's great. There are a good handful of Hitchcock films I like more than.
Well, I figure that Vertigo gets too much press, even though I do love it and it's a work of genius.
Yeah,
so
but
I
Psycho
figure
was the famous one for years. That's relatively new for people wanking off over Vertigo.
that's it
I
for
love
sure.
it.
And I'm
I
pretty
love
sure that you can't go to the cinema now.
Without
The
wanking.
way, yeah, exactly. Without doing that.
Although the one that the sort of the lesser one that never gets talked about that I really, really love is Rope.
No, I love Rope, definitely. I think it's fantastic. Technologically, technically even, it's brilliant. And there's a lot to unpick there. So I'm really looking forward to getting to the Hitchcock series when we do get there.
Plus also
Okay.
Jimmy Stewart.
And Jimmy
Yes.
Stewart's in Rope as well, yeah.
I think it's one of those, because obviously it's adapted from a stage play, but I think it's one of those few adaptations that really lives up to being adapted for the screen. Sometimes, obviously, it can be quite laborious, but Hitchcock manages to make it really electric.
Actually,
together with
the
performances.
film he does that's very famous, but actually I think is stagey, is Dial M for Murder. I don't think that stands up very well at all, actually.
I would be inclined to agree, but I mean, it's still fantastic. Just
Well, Ray
brilliant
Milland's
performances
great in
all round, but
yeah.
I think it lends a lot to kind of like the lighting and also the editing as well.
So who's in Back to the Future, Becca?
We took a massive diversion there. As you know, the movie stars Michael J. Fox, Christopher Lloyd, Lee Thompson, Crispin Glover, Thomas Alfredson, and Billy Zane, if you can spot him in a cameo, with a script by Bob Gale and Robert Zemeckis, a score by Alan Silvestri, and directed by Robert Zemeckis, and released in 1985. Oh my god.
So does it count as a cameo when you're not famous?
Well, it's kind of one of those things like before.
Or is it
he was
just
famous,
a
wasn't
small
it, really?
role?
A small role before he
A
was famous.
small role with no dialogue.
No, it's like, oh, there's Billy
Billy
Zane.
Zane is one of Biff's goons in the 50s.
But he looks very dapper.
He looks like Billy Zane.
Well, he does, but he looks like he belongs in the 50s.
Yeah, this is like Billy Zane with hair.
Yeah, before he went baldo. So,
Yeah. So a couple of years pre-Dead Calm, which I think was the first thing that
that was a brilliant film as
really,
well.
really brought him to people's...
Yeah,
Actually, Dead Calm was about 89, but yeah.
So, anyway,
So
how did you guys come to this film? What are your first experiences of it, Dave?
My first experience, I kind of almost missed it at the time. I saw Teen Wolf first, and I think maybe 2 to 3 years after the film was released, I still hadn't seen it. Don't even remember my first viewing, particularly. I don't remember ever not loving this film in this series after seeing it. But having said that, I don't remember my first viewing, which you think I might if it was that impressive. I certainly remember by the time the sequels came out, I was really excited for them. So I clearly knew the films very well by that point. But yeah, through like 85, 86, and possibly even 87, I knew Teen Wolf better. That was like the mid-80s Michael J. Fox film, which is a film he's deeply embarrassed by now. So yeah, I know it through its sequels much, much better in that I've seen this film many more times than the sequels, but I probably I remember the hype around those a lot more. It's always been possibly, since the early 90s, this would have been amongst my favourite films. I remember being a lot more taken with the sequel to start with. That's certainly not the case anymore, and I'll kind of explain why next week when we come to cover it. But yeah, it's not a particularly storied history. It wasn't something that blew me away originally. It's not something that I've known since 1985 itself, but it's been in my top 2 favourite films for almost as long as I can remember now.
Chris, how about yourself?
Well, for myself, yeah, similar with Dave. Things with Back to the Future. It's one of those films that's always been there as a child. As a childhood, really. I mean, I would have been 3 initial release, so by as far back as I remember, it's always been kind of one of those films that's like that's been on TV, or you've it's always known when you're like around the circles with at school. Really, everyone kind of knew Back to the Future, so it's always kind of like a firm favourite. So you always have like sort of warm memories of it, like watching it like around Christmas time or around Easter or whenever. It was always very enjoyable film, but I never really had like a really deep appreciation for it. It was just one of those like good 80s films, really. But it was only really when it got re-released. I can't remember. Is it getting near now?
I think, because we've talked about this before, I think you went to see it on its 25th anniversary.
Yes.
Which wasn't. I mean, I don't know whether we got it later.
Was that 5 years ago, or was that?
It would have been 2010.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
So
it
came out around October. Now, I'm going to look it up right now because I don't know if maybe we got it later in the year, or maybe it was just where there was a gap in programming that was a good place to put the film. Because I remember it being October, partly because my birthday's in October, and whilst I didn't see it on my birthday, I just naturally might remember things from that month a little bit better, perhaps. So I went to see it on the big screen. The only time I've ever seen it on the big screen, I think, was October 2010, and you fall in love with it all over again. And that was a new master of the film, ready for the Blu-ray release.
Yeah, I mean, I remember seeing it like last showing like 11 o'clock, like dead late on a Saturday evening, and I just sort of, well, ironically running late, just as like the opening sequence, the clocks, and yeah, it was never a firm favourite, but I want to say this was the moment where I really discovered the film in itself. I mean, after years of always watching it and always liking it, seeing it on the big screen was a magical reason. It was a magical experience for two reasons. One, it it became one of my favourite films because it just felt like watching it fresh. Like every joke landed like as if it was brand new. I even got like the heavy stuff. I was like, oh shit, there's shit in here I've not even seen before. There was just everything about the film was just great. It just worked. It was one of the best cinematic experiences ever. And it just also reaffirmed my feelings on cinema. Like, I thought this is how great cinema can be. I mean, when you watch a film projected on a big screen with a great sound system, hopefully with no interruptions. I know it sounds stupid, but I much prefer like a reasonably empty screen, but that's me. It's just great. It's just, you just feel like engrossed in it more than you would do at home, and it was, I walked out there sort of just buzzing, and just sort of almost like a newfound love for, I mean, I've always liked cinema, but I probably, if you ask me, I probably prefer film rather than cinema, but from watching that, I really got the experience aspect of it, and it just sort of felt, So
I got quite emotional at that screening. I can't remember if it was one screening or a limited release. I think it was one screening, and I got quite emotional. And again, I didn't sit there sobbing or anything, but it actually kind of, I got a bit choked up. There was something about it was like getting back something you've loved and lost almost. And I don't know why, because I had a copy of it sat at home, albeit on DVD. I think the other thing was the restoration and the big screen and the sort of the higher resolution pulled out details I'd never seen before. I mean, I had no idea until that screening that Christopher Lloyd was wearing aging makeup. I always thought that was a joke in the second film, that he pulled off that sort of cover on his face and looked exactly the same. But there's a plot reason to do it, because he's wearing. You see it with Strickland when Strickland's in the hallway talking to Marty.
It looks exactly the same.
They've painted something on his neck to sort of tighten the skin, almost like a glue. And of course, it's just to make him look a little bit older. They've done it to Doc, and they needed to get it off him in the sequels, even though he looks ostensibly the same. So yeah, there's a lot of detail in the Blu-ray that shows up that wasn't there on home releases originally. And they're very saturated colours anyway, these films. They're very colourful. 2 and 3 more so. But yeah, you can totally see it. I remember that screening myself, and it was a special screening to me too. I'd already fallen in love with it. I think some of it is my love for It's a Wonderful Life, because I actually think of this as the modern It's a Wonderful Life anyway. It is, and I think you can look at a few effects in it and all the rest of it, but it's the one. I mean, firstly, the filmmakers have referenced Capra, and we'll come to that a bit later. And secondly, I know it's the second film, but what is alternate 1985 if not Pottersville? So yeah, I think my love of one film leads me to a love of the other one, because they touch the same parts of me with my consent. Yeah, so it's always been a special film to me. Becca?
Yeah, it's just one of those films that sort of, obviously being a fan of Jurassic Park and sort of Spielberg in general, along with sort of Indiana Jones and the like, although I've never seen Jaws all the way through. Run and hide from the internet.
Haven't you seen
Jaws all the way through?
No, but which bit have you seen?
Oh, which bit? Up until...
Do you watch the start and then not get through it, or have you never seen the start?
I've just never made it all the way through. I'll go up to like the beach scene, where he's looking over the beach, and you've got the famous like zoom in, pull out effect. And for some reason, I've never got past that. I don't know why.
You got put off the moment you see Roy Scheider.
Yeah, Roy Scheider. I'm like, shit. I don't know why. I've just always been interrupted at that point. But no, definitely, it's one of those films that has kind of always kind of cropped up and everything. And it's probably one of the first films that I saw, starting my love of cinema, very latent love of cinema. Sort of, watch it whenever I can. Always get like the different versions that come out. I remember going to see it at open air cinema a few years ago with my dad, and that was great fun. Some people there were kind of dressed up as sort of like 50s gear and 80s gear. A lot of cosplay, which is pretty interesting. It's just one of those things that I think, as I was saying earlier, it's kind of may not be my favourite film of all time, but for me it is the greatest film of all time. You've got everything in it. It's like comedy, action, drama, obviously a sci-fi, obviously a time travel element. So that's quite interesting. And there's a lot of times where the stakes are quite high. They've got really great performances. Michael J. Fox is fantastic. Evergreen. Crispin Glover, always interesting. As in front of the screen, in front of the camera as he is behind it. Endlessly watch his films. I just think he's a creative genius. Really admire his work. Christopher Lloyd, iconic. DeLorean is iconic. Obviously shot on the famous Town Square stage at Universal. Universal Studios is one of my favourite places to go in the world. I love it. If I lived near and had more money, I would go there every day. Mainly for the Jurassic Park ride, as that's immense. But just because they take you can do the VIP experience, and they show you how it was made, and you can visit all the sets, and it's just so cool. I love it. But yeah, no, I do like this film a whole lot. But I think I probably should be a more, I don't know, bigger fan than I am. But it's just one of those films I keep on going back to. I think I read somewhere that USC have it as when they always put it on their screenwriting course as like the perfect script, or one of the most perfect scripts. This film just has it all.
I mean,
really.
I've never studied screenwriting, but I've seen enough films to know, and it's not so much that the film's good, because there are plenty of good films out there.
Oh, sure, definitely.
It's the fact that every scene is it's all set up and payoff.
Oh, of course, completely.
And also every scene, with one exception, advances plot or character, and the one scene that doesn't advance plot or character is a welcome buffer between two emotional sort of crescendos anyway. The Johnny B. Good scene is the one scene that doesn't actually advance anything.
No, I was going to say the Johnny B. Good, definitely. But you've got all the callbacks there, sort of like historical moments.
It's a break between Biff getting knocked out and him having to hit the lightning beam.
Yes.
So it's actually, I think it's virtually perfect.
Definitely, yeah, and it's really influential as well. Obviously, like Family Guy, Simpsons, obviously Rick and Morty, most recently.
Which I've not seen.
Oh, you got to see it. No, it's really good. I mean, that in itself, obviously, is a very crude, but in the best way, riff of Doc and Marty, definitely. But I think in itself started life in a very generous idea. It was like a parody of Back to the Future. But no, it's really funny. It's on
I
Netflix.
don't even know the premise, so I'll have to look into it.
But it's a similar sort of thing, basically, because Morty's basically like this teenage boy, and Rick is like scientist grandfather, and obviously he's the most cleverest man in the world, and he's very, very crude and very sweary, and it's very funny. I urge you to check it out.
I'm not sure about bad language.
Really, Dave? This film was like hugely influential on across a whole range of genres.
It's the one film as well. Well, no, there are several films to be fair, but it's always one of the first films mentioned out of people's mouths, along with It's a Wonderful Life, funnily enough, as though sacrosanct, do not remake this. Now, I don't want a remake of this, but at the same time, this film still exists if they do some piss poor remake. Just by the fact that like RoboCop is not a worse film because they released a shit one 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Why would they remake it?
Money.
Well, I'm sure you could.
In RoboCop's case, I mean, that was one of MGM's few intellectual properties. So you can understand them wanting to kickstart some kind of franchise. This film's a difficult one to remake without taking very loosely the premise because it falls in a very specific period. In that, if you want to go... I mean, the 50s and the 80s are further apart now. Now, again, I mean, when you had something like, what was it called? Hot Tub Time Machine. There were lots of jokes about, not being able to find your place, your way anywhere, and, not being able to reach people because you didn't have email and all the rest of it, and, messaging. But the fact is, a 90s child or an 80s, well, not an 80s child, an adult in the 80s or 90s would be much more similar to us morally as people than they would have been from people in the 50s because the sexual revolution happened between the two and society liberalised quite a lot. Now, every generation has huge gaps, but I think the 50s to the 80s is something, even aesthetically, I'm not quite sure you can do again in the same way.
No, just like they're both really quite iconic eras in time, aren't they, as well? I mean, I don't think if you were to remake Back to the Future, heaven forfend, even if it was a critical box office smash, I don't know, you wouldn't have the same sort of thing just because like such a lot happened in the 50s and the 60s and 1980s as well in terms of like the fashion, the politics, the music, the culture.
Well, if it came out this year and it was literally the same, you'd be going back to 1987.
Well, no, that's true.
And that's a very different era than now. I mean, you would have different fashions and you would have different... I mean, you'd probably have kind of almost like an Atomic Blonde kind of aesthetic, I'd imagine.
Well, that's true. We have Jaws 13 or whatever it is.
I'm not suggesting it couldn't be done, but I'm suggesting that although there's always a generational gap, the generational gap between people who reached sort of the age of majority, if you like, in the 50s and people who did it in the 80s would be much greater. Their life experience might be more similar. We were talking about this briefly on Smorgasbord the other day, in that if you went to university in the 50s or say the 80s, I can imagine they'd be much more similar experiences because, I mean, even the way you work would be similar, whereas now everything's done sort of electronically, everything's submitted online. The way you go about referencing other authors in your work, I don't even know how it works now because I was pre all of that with it being online. But morally, I would think me at 19 and a kid at 19 now would not be wildly different. There would be differences, but they wouldn't be as great as the sort of differences we see in this film. I don't know if you agree with that.
Especially with because we go through particularly 80s resurgence as well in terms of fashion. So the fashion itself wouldn't look that amiss these days now. It wouldn't. It's quite a lot of like kind of big bright clothing now. So even like as Marty goes back, it's like everyone's sort of thinking he's like a sailor or something, what are you doing wearing a life preserver? It's like, where's a gilet? It
was a lot more formal as an era as well, wasn't it? The 50s. And they've deliberately gone, and I've heard them talk about this on the extras, that they deliberately went, even their commercial tie-ins, they went for brands where the logos changed, like Texaco. You see Texaco in, I think, all three films, but you'd certainly see it in 2015 in the second film. They went for things where you could go, look how different that looks, whereas some things didn't change. So, they could have got more money for, I'm not even sure this was the example, but for argument's sake, they could have had more money from Shell. But Shell looked very similar in the 50s to how it looked in the 80s. So some of it is very wise filmmaking as well. And also because it takes place in the same physical space, they filmed all the 50s stuff first and then grimed it down to do the 90s. So when you go back to the 50s, it all looks a bit more sort of sparkling and new.
Oh, okay, that's probably a good idea.
Interesting.
Yeah, they filmed, like, for example, the Universal backlot, so the square, the town square. They filmed all the 50s stuff there. They did most of the shops' facades were literally just that, facades. They could take them down and put another one up. But you see it on some of the special features. They're using, like, dirty, muddy water and stuff just to put a bit of wear into, like, window frames and things like that. They're not trying to make it look like hell on earth. They're just trying to make it look older, grimier, etc. Whereas in the 50s, it's all new. Even the school.
Yeah, I was just thinking of the school because they do references, like, you know.
He references it. He says,
yeah.
"Wow, this place looks brand new."
Yeah.
Well, probably is, Marty. Yeah, so I think it took place in a very special time. They were travelling from a very distinctive era to another very, very distinctive era, and an era that had already started to sort of create a mythos and nostalgia around it.
Mm.
So, I mean, even the car he drives at the end to take his mum to the dance is really cool. I'm not saying I'd want to drive a car like that because it's probably a nightmare to drive, but they look distinctive and they look good. Whereas
They're very iconic, aren't they?
Obviously, 80s cars look shit. You wouldn't really want to see, like, you really wouldn't want to go back, you know, drive a Nissan Micra or something from the 80s.
Like one of the things I kept thinking about the DeLorean was, like, you know how the doors open up. Well, imagine trying to park that thing in some confined space and just thinking, oh shit.
We'll get onto the DeLorean as we go because I can see why they chose it, but it looks a lot cooler than it really is apparently in reality. I guess we ought to get into a little bit of the background around this film before we go into it. Long time in gestation. I do believe the first draft of the script was 1981. Marty, in that version of the script, was the firstborn. They wanted it to be from the sort of mid-50s because they wanted him to invent rock and roll. As they couldn't get it made, they kind of would make the age gap, the gap slightly longer, and then they gave him older siblings. I've read different versions where the script actually shifted, the 50s location shifted as well, but I've heard them say that it was always the 1950s and it went from like a 25 to 26 year gap to 30 years, and they gave him two older siblings. What else? Originally, it was going to be a couple of different things. Firstly, there was going to be a chimp in it, I think, instead of Einstein.
Chimp.
And it was Sid Sheinberg, the head of the studio, that said no movies with chimps in it ever made any money. And they said, well, what about and Every Which Way But Loose and Any Which Way You Can? And he replied, but that's an orangutan. Yeah, so that was Sid Sheinberg. Yeah, he had some very strange things. The other thing was he wanted to call it Spaceman from Pluto. And he passed that as a note. And, of course, he's the head of the studio, so the two Bobs, Gale and Zemeckis, are looking at it and going, what on earth do we do? So they went to Steven Spielberg and said, look, we've got this note. We can't call it Spaceman from Pluto. What do we do? So Steven Spielberg said, leave it with me. And he wrote Sid Sheinberg a letter, and it just said, thanks for your terrific note. It was really funny. We all had such a good laugh at your tremendous joke. Right? And he never brought it up again because he didn't want to admit that, like, he was serious.
No.
So, and the other factor was Marty McFly is played by Michael J. Fox here. He was the first choice, but wasn't the first casting. He was the first choice of both Bobs, actually, but I think it was particularly Gale that had spotted him. And he was, they approached the studio, and I don't know which studio that was, but Gary Goldberg, was it? I forget the name. The guy who was running Family Ties. And he said, no, do not show him the script, because there's no way he can film around one of the biggest shows in America.
It's like Brosnan and Remington Steele over again.
It's very, very similar, actually. And what made it worse was Meredith Baxter was the female lead in the film, in the TV show, and I think she was pregnant, so an awful lot more of the stories were revolving around the Alex P. Keaton character. So it was very much, we have we can't do this because his workload's too heavy. So they went ahead and reluctantly cast Eric Stoltz, and this is always horrible when they end up recasting somebody, because it ends up looking like a knock on the original guy. I mean, but better actors than Eric Stoltz have been replaced on stuff. I mean, I always think of Harvey Keitel with Apocalypse Now. Filmed a couple of weeks in the Willard role.
But yeah, you couldn't really sort of see the film with Harvey Keitel. It wouldn't be quite the same film, would it?
Well, I remember Coppola saying he took full responsibility for it, and he said the problem is Harvey Keitel is too active. He said Willard is a very passive character. You think he's often just on the boat, just watching the world, and Harvey Keitel's way too busy for that. I think we've got a similar problem with Samuel L. Jackson at playing a Jedi. I think he's too active a character for a Jedi Master. Eric Stoltz's problem is, firstly, his process is very serious, and they said that he just wasn't getting the tone of the action, the comedy that they were going for, and so the film wasn't funny. And they filmed now. Originally, it was always said he was replaced after a couple of weeks. I'm now led to believe he filmed for over 5 weeks. So the majority of the film had him in, and I'm pretty sure there are still shots in the film where people are reacting to Eric Stoltz. There'll be shots where like Biff is replying to somebody or something, and they are. I'm pretty sure there are shots with Doc talking direct to the camera on the parking lot, and that's actually he's talking to Eric Stoltz. You only refilm what you need to refilm. Anything where he's looking directly at someone's eye line, they need to change because he's a lot shorter. It also meant a change to the Jennifer character, because Jennifer was originally cast as Melora Harding, who's probably best known for the American version of The Office. I think she played Michael's boss in it. I've seen early seasons of it, but not a lot beyond that.
Oh, I've seen it before.
But again, when they went to their original choice was Claudia Wells. Claudia Wells dropped out to do something else, and by the time it came up again, she was available. I think Melora Harding was too tall. Eric Stoltz is close to 6 foot, I believe, and Michael J. Fox is 5'5". So it does affect who you cast to be with these people. And I think all the other differences we'll talk about as we go through it. I think we can get into it as we go through it sequentially, which I think is a good idea to do that, folks.
And why not?
Yeah, go for it. I mean, I did hear that the original concept of the time machine was originally going to be a fridge.
Yes, I heard. I don't know if it was literally a fridge or it was some kind of chamber, and their fear was kids would lock themselves in the fridge. But the gist was it wasn't a mobile thing. And in fact, in early versions of the script, they had to go to like a nuclear sort of test facility and things like that.
Yeah.
And sort of, yeah, I have read alternate versions of the script, although I do get confused on what I've read because I've read the original version of Back to the Future 2. And I can't remember which is in which one, but we'll go into that next week. I've read the 1967 version of Back to the Future 2.
Okay. They had different. I haven't heard about this. They had a different idea for the sequel.
Well, with Back to the Future 2, everything from the future's the same, and it ends up with Doc in the Old West. But when they go back to 1955, it was originally that Biff had given his younger self the sports almanac in 1967, so they had to go back there.
Okay.
So there's a version of the script where Lorraine's very sort of, peace and love man. So yeah. So I think originally they talk about it in the commentaries and various interviews and stuff that they would basically they wrote with an awful lot of sort of index cards, and they would have like things they wanted to happen, and then it would lead them to need to do a corresponding card for earlier in the film. So, for example, they wanted Marty to invent rock and roll. So you've got to have an early scene that suggests that he plays guitar, hence the first scene of the film. Later on, you've got him effectively inventing skateboards, so you need to see him on a skateboard early in the film, and so on. Mm-hmm. And this film is great for that. We start with Doc's lab, and again, we get a lot of information about Doc without seeing him.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a brilliant opening, and it's not one you generally think of because it's just the sound of no music whatsoever, no like big opening title scenes or anything like that. You just hear the tickings of the clock, and you just see this big, long, sweeping shot giving you this little information. You can tell, like, he's not been in his apartment for a while, or has been busy doing something. You hear about like the uranium or the
plutonium, wasn't it?
Yeah, sorry, plutonium. Yeah.
Has gone missing. Has been stolen.
In a kind of passive way.
There's a lot of information that you can't. This is one of those openings to a film that you really have to pay attention to. You can't just sit back and have it on in the background. It tells you a lot about stuff that's going to crop up again later on.
You could,
I suppose.
You could.
But you'll miss it.
You'd still enjoy the film, but you'd miss a lot. I mean,
yeah, you would miss out.
You'll find out later that he's stolen plutonium with the help of some Libyans. So, I mean, if you missed it here, it wouldn't be the end of the world. But if you're watching it later as like an exercise in how they did it and how they've constructed
it,
how wonderful is it?
I just think it's kind of like original how they just decided to go for quite a quiet opening. You get the big Back to the Future titles, but with just silence and just ticking clocks. And it's just very calm, very controlled. Gives you information.
I'm sure one of the clocks is Harold Lloyd as well. I might have misremembered that. But I think one of the clocks has that sort of Harold Lloyd from Safety Last motif on it, which of course the end of the film parodies, or at least homages, depends which way you want to look at it. But it's all set up and payoff. So we understand that he uses a skateboard, he goes there to use the guitar, or to use the big amp, basically. Plutonium has gone missing. Doc hasn't been there for a while. Doc's got a dog. There are tons of clocks there, so there's something eccentric about this guy, and it also outlines the motif. You get a mention of Statler Toyota. You see Statler all the way through this series. I think Statler is like. I think Statler deals in horses back in the 1880s, but yeah.
Yeah, there's a comment they're running through the series, isn't it?
So all of these things, just a little bit of setup. Disgusting bowl of dog food.
I know.
And also you get the impression
I wouldn't feed that to my dog. You
also could tell he's an inventor.
Yeah.
Because Doc could mean anything, but he's invented all these contraptions to get food open and things like that for the dog.
Got the arm, haven't you, to kind of open the...
But the thing about, like, the hot water going into, like, with no container, no coffee pot or anything. And it's just like, oh, right, well, he's not been there to put that in place, so... and then you see Mark McFly's feet enter into shot, and then you see the plutonium under the bed.
We've mentioned Wallace and Gromit before. Obviously, that's where I think Wallace, being an inventor, takes a lot of. That's where Nick Park will take a lot of takes a lot of his inspiration from.
Well, lots of like stages to an invention, not just something that does something, but something that's got about 400 different mechanisms and stages to it to boil an egg. You see it in Back to the Future 3 with just a piece of ice.
Yeah, literally.
So he's gone there to play his guitar. Now, they often say that one of the very few knocks on this film, and there aren't many, is that it was never explained why he'd be friends with an old man.
That's always a bit suspicious, isn't it?
Well, only now if you're looking at it a certain way. I mean, I didn't spend years thinking, I bet they're at it or something. It never really occurred to me. But
it's one of those things you have in the 80s, or like in kind of
the kooky guy in the street who's good fun and also an amp you can use. That's what I would theorise, and I think that may even have been said by the filmmakers that would have what they would have bonded over music or something like that.
I think also that there is an element of that. Marty's kind of like an outsider. He's not like a kid who gets like a hard time like his dad did at school. But he's very much like he's not like the popular.
You don't
kid.
see him with friends, do you? At all?
No.
Thinking about it.
I mean, yeah, he's got a girlfriend, which
and he's got a band, so they're probably friends. But you don't see him hang out with people, do you?
No, he's very much like I think he's one of these like of outcast. I don't know what would you call him? Maybe like wallflower, maybe. But he's very much like someone who's like very much like a free spirit in terms of he's.
Well, he's nothing like his siblings, is he?
No.
And in fact, one of his siblings works at like a fast food place.
Yeah.
You can tell by what he's wearing. Now, I always thought that when you first watch the film, that could be a part-time job or anything, or just a filling-in job. But of course, at the end of the film, we draw a contrast with he's got a career. So clearly, the best his older brother can manage is a fast food place. And that's not to denigrate that type of work, but the film is telling us that his family don't tend to succeed at stuff. And he's got a great deal of determination not to be the same.
He's told that at school. He's told like, "Oh no, McFly is ever about to, say, well, history's going to change." It's kind of like, haha, kind of a clever sort of like note in the film. But yeah, I've always read it that he's just one of those guys who just didn't really fit into anywhere really. He's always kind of like, he wasn't the cool kid at school, but he's the kid who probably in reality is probably the cool kid. Like, he's the coolest guy there, but no one gives a shit. You know what I mean? So, I think there's part of that he's just like, oh, well, some just take interest in him, and he's like, oh, just the amount of this guy doing, like, a lot of experiments, that's kind of interesting. Just kind of like a mutual type of thing.
He wouldn't care who he's supposed to be seen hanging out with. And if he finds a 60-year-old interesting, or a 40-year-old interesting, or a 20-year-old interesting, so what?
Yeah.
Never really thought about that, but you're probably right. Yeah.
It's just one of those things. I mean, I think one of the things you could throw out is like how can Marty... I mean, the contrast between Marty and his dad isn't that obvious. There's not much... you think, well, how come he's like George when George is nothing like Marty? And it only really hit me actually in this viewing that I think when we go back, I mean, forgive me, I'm jumping ahead here, but it's more of a general point. I think when we once he goes to the 50s, I think he's actually more like his mum. I think he's got certain traits of his father, like he doesn't like rejection. That's like this main trait he's got from his dad, and that's like the kind of like goes into the whole arc of the 3 films itself. But
that's because there's no track record of success in the family.
Yeah, but I think in terms of like when you look at how his mum was at school, I think that he's got more in common with his mum than his dad.
I think this is where the sequels have started to suffer in recent years in my mind. That in early viewings, particularly of the second one, I just thought what a clever piece of filmmaking it is, and I still think that, but it's definitely an awful lot more cartoonish. At this stage, if you only had this film, you don't have them all looking like each other. I mean, he doesn't go back to 1955 and his father's played by him. I mean, you do have them as distinctive presences rather than they're all different roles being played by the same people. I wasn't a lot like my dad in a lot of ways, so I don't see it as wildly odd. It's just he's a third child, but he's almost like an only child.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a hangover from an early part of the script, or maybe it's just the age gap. His older brother and sister are a few years older than him, and he has actually spent most of his time by himself because we don't see him with friends at all. And
he doesn't seem to have that much in common with his family either. So
yeah, although you see some affection there. I think.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not wild. I'm not suggesting that you see wild amounts of it, but he's comfortable around them. He's used to them. I think he loves his parents. I think there's I can see an affection with his father.
I mean, there is a certain level of disappointment when he doesn't stand up to Biff. He's like, oh, Dad, why? Why'd you let him do this? And there is a nice, almost like resistant in older Biff when he looks at Marty. Almost if he's almost hesitant. That he's not quite the pushover.
There's a
like his dad
pause
is.
before he says, "What are you looking at, butthead?" Like he's not used to someone looking at him. Marty's not afraid of him.
Yeah.
At all. But he has to respect that his father is, and of course he's Biff's his supervisor. So Marty can't do anything. He could end up getting his father fired.
But there is that nice sort of level of like little bit of confrontation that he's like, oh crap.
It's often been said, and it's absolutely true. It's more so next week. Firstly, of all the actors in this, Thomas F. Wilson has aged into his old age makeup in that he now looks a bit like this Biff. Bit better
Unfortunately,
dressed.
he does, sadly.
But also, Biff in middle age is Donald Trump to look at.
He really is. I was thought, it's a kind of uncanny parallel.
Does he have the best words?
It's on purpose.
He has the best words. In fact, he has all the words.
Does he have scrumptious words?
Yeah.
Oh, if only he had Twitter. If only they knew the Twitter going back in.
Yeah, definitely.
So anyway, but it's cutting back a bit earlier. Doc calls him at the lab, and it turns out the clocks were a part of an experiment. So you get the, damn, I'm late for school, and then Huey Lewis.
Huey Lewis and the news.
Yeah, and it's like, Kenny does the cool thing where riding on the on tails of cars, pissing people off. Wasn't one of them the director as well? I'm pretty sure.
If I watched it again, and I've seen it countless times, you're probably right, but I've never...
Yeah.
I can see it in my head now. It's
the one guy who turns around and looks at him.
It's the open top. Yeah, that's Bob Zemeckis. I've never really thought about it, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So yeah, I bet lots of people wanted to do that back in that day when they saw that.
Yeah, he is kind of pretty effortlessly cool. I'm not sure that Michael J. Fox really screams cool to me, but his overall impact on the film's really great. But yeah, he goes to school and he's late, so we get the character part that Mr. Strickland hates the McFlys, and genuinely does. He just genuinely thinks they're all losers and says as much. And what else?
We meet Jenny.
Jennifer, yeah.
Yeah.
Jennifer, who's recast after this week, but Claudia Wells in this film. Then we go straight forward to after school with Battle of the Bands, don't we?
Yeah, we get Huey Lewis judging playing his music. So
It's too
just
loud.
Too damn loud.
Too darn loud.
While Jennifer gives
what I love about that is only he moves.
Yeah.
The shot composition is wonderful. If you look at the judges around him, they don't even change expressions while Marty's playing.
No, they just literally
They look almost zombified. And then he looks at them, no reaction, times it perfectly, similar length of look to each side, and then gets up and stops them.
Brilliant.
The guy who's playing, I think it's bass, that Michael J. Fox goes over and sort of plays, stood next to, was his guitar coach. Taught him all the moves for Johnny B. Good later in the film and stuff.
Oh, so he actually did kind of play it. It wasn't just miming.
He did the fingering, Chris.
Okay.
Pardon?
He did the fingering with guidance from other men.
Fingering is actually a proper term in music.
I know.
I did notice that Jennifer does give Marty some really gooey eyes, like almost like.
I did wonder what you were going to say there, Chris.
Well, come fuck me eyes kind of thing, but then
Yeah.
there's no.
Not
there's
come
no
to bed
numbers
eyes,
later on.
it's come fuck me eyes. We've talked about that before. Come fuck me eyes.
But yeah, no. Then they meet. Then they're basically outside the
She's
tower.
really cute, Jennifer. I mean, obviously now, the age I am now, she'd be ridiculously too young for me. But I always had a bit of a crush on her when I was younger.
Yeah, well,
I was gutted when they recast her.
Yeah, well, she's an attractive young lady.
But we'll come to the reasons for the recast in later weeks. So, he goes to the square with Jennifer. They've got quite good chemistry, those two.
Yeah.
And you get the Save the Clock Tower bit.
Yes. There's a lady with she gets again. All these things are just always come towards the end. She gets a leaflet about the clock tower. She writes her name on it on the back of it. So it's
cyclical, really, isn't it? It does come back to.
And like all these sort of plot points that that help drive the plot along. You don't even think about it at the time. You may not even think about it when you watch it the first few times, but when you actually examine it from a script point of view, it's there for a reason. As little as that bit of paper that Marty hands to him just to prove, like, look, I've got a girlfriend, or I've got someone who cares for me.
Yeah.
and it's the information that they need to know that the clock tower strikes.
But the writing of the conversation works because he
Yeah.
doesn't go, "We need a bolt of lightning." Oh, hang on.
Yeah,
It's really, really well done. So we save the clock tower, so we know that 30 years before at this point, lightning struck it. It hasn't moved since. It's stuck at 10:04. Also, the ledge...
it's like 30 years and not even fixed it. Fuck it.
No, the ledge is in...
Just going to show what a shit Mayor Goldie is, really.
Yeah. Like, keeps the floor clean. But the ledge is intact. That's worth noticing as well. You see the ledge, which obviously Doc will break later.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's broken later and in future films and it once Marty comes back, it's forever broken thereafter. But at this stage, it's intact. And Jennifer, and Marty wants the 4x4. That's very 80s. The fact that that's his biggest ambition in life, that car.
Well, he wants the car to go and have a
And also
nice...
the going up to the lake is key setup as well, because his mother says how disgraceful that is. And apparently when they were one of the first things that Bob Gale thought about was he saw that his father was president of his graduating class, and he thought about the president of his graduating class and realised he didn't like him. And he thought, well, would I have liked my father had I been at school with him? And then he got to thinking about how your parents might be different, A, from you, and B, from what you are told about them. So that explains why they're not the same as Marty. They have to be different. But also, Mother paints herself as purer than pure. And when he gets back to the 50s, she wants some.
Isn't she an alcoholic as well in there?
She's an alcoholic in the original 1985, yes.
Yeah.
Or she's certainly drinking too much, put it that way. So, yeah, where do we go from there? He's got what is to borrow the car to go up to the lake, and when he gets home, Biff has smashed it up. And again, it's not his fault. Nothing's ever his fault, which is also very Donald Trump.
Yeah, he's drinking while he's driving, and he's like sort of came out of nowhere and nearly spilt my beer.
My beer.
So yeah, no, it's I think
he smashes up his car and then basically says, "And you're getting my dry cleaning bill."
Yeah, and it's pretty much verbatim about what we see later on about his own work.
Yeah,
like it almost pretty much is for beat. Like
he's basically
you don't get me expelled, you don't get me fired, do you?
Yeah, George is doing the reports that it's Biff's job to do. So it goes beyond delegation down the chain. He's literally doing Biff's work for him.
Yeah.
And it was the same when he was at school. He used to do Biff's homework.
It's kind of carried on really along the line.
And then, so Martin's upset because he can't go knob Jennifer, and that's
He actually says that. I can't go knob Jennifer.
Well, it's not said, but come on, I mean,
yeah, and she doesn't like her because when I was in school, we never called a boy or sat in a parked car with a boy.
She really just laboured the point, doesn't she? Like,
yeah, and when you meet someone, it's just meant to be.
Yeah.
Again, all of this is set up because we see how they meet. We get a bit of story about the Enchantment of the Sea dance, and that's where they kiss for the first time. So Marty needs to know that information. More importantly, the viewers need to know because the kids will have been told this story time and time again, no doubt.
Yeah. It is kind of played as like, oh, not this again.
What they're watching on TV is what they will later be watching at Lorraine's parents' house.
And one of the things that I did pick up on was like just how great George's reactions are when she's telling about how they first met. You don't realise it on first viewing.
He feels a bit guilty, doesn't he?
But knowing that which one of the things which is great about rewatching it, you get to sort of see how things actually play.
Yeah, he just looks absent the first time, but the second time it's like, shit, what do I say? Yeah. What were you doing in the road? What, Lorraine? What?
Yeah, what?
We find out later what he was doing and we'll come to it.
But it plays great because at first it just seems like he's distracted by the TV more than anything. So he kind of
worth pointing out his two siblings. So that the George McFly is played by Crispin Glover, We've covered Bruce Glover, his father, because he was Mr. Wint in Diamonds Are Forever. Yeah. And they're very similar screen presences, and they're very similar individuals in the way they come across. Wendy Jo Sperber plays what's his Linda, isn't it? His eldest sister. She died aged 47 about 10 years ago of breast cancer.
Shame, isn't it?
Breast cancer, yeah. She'd been diagnosed at about 39. And we have seen David before. David is Mark McClure, also Jimmy Olsen.
Excuse me,
also Jimmy Olsen in
Superman.
In the Superman films.
Not to be confused with Troy McClure from.
And he also had a cameo in Justice League.
That wasn't actually in the final cut, though.
Yes, it was.
Was it?
Yeah, it was.
Oh,
I saw it because I was like, "Oh, that's Mark McClure."
I've not seen him yet, but I'll check it out.
I got a feeling he was the prison officer, but I can't quite remember now. But yeah, Mark McClure is in the final cut. So we get all the background on the Enchantment Under the Sea dance. We work out how Marty has seen what a rerun is of that Jackie Gleason show. We can tell that David is a bit of a loser, and Linda
Uncle
is
Joey's
lonely.
in prison as well. That's like running gag.
Yeah, he's been denied parole. So we know that one at least. So mother's an alcoholic, and uncle is in prison. Sister is lonely because she's been encouraged not to meet anyone, basically, because it's supposed to just happen for her. And David works in fast food. George is being bullied, and we've met Biff. The only old age makeup I think in this film that's really bad is Lorraine. I don't think her middle age makeup looks very good.
No, that you can tell.
It does look fake.
Yeah.
I've got a fun fact about that later on.
Okay, cool. And he's been asked by the.
What's a fun fact? It looks fake more than others.
He's got to meet Doc at like 1:15 a.m.
Yeah.
And he's about 3 minutes late. But yeah, he has to meet him at Twin Pines Mall.
Which later becomes Lone Pine Mall, as we all know.
Yeah, and he does it with 25 minutes because he has to go and go to Doc's place. So he meets him at the Twin Pines Mall in the car park.
Yeah.
Where he brings out his DeLorean time machine.
This car looked impossibly cool when I was a kid.
It still looks kind of cool now, though, really.
It looks kind of cool. Apparently, it's a nightmare to drive. I mean, it's just not a very well-made or good car at all. He said that every time you move the gear stick, you scrape your knuckles, and it's not a very practical car. It's not a very high-quality build car. It flopped terribly, and then there was a scandal about money laundering and cocaine around John DeLorean and his company anyway afterwards. The car would be almost infamous if it wasn't for this film. Actually, the cars made it famous as opposed to infamous.
Famous.
It's just famous in this case.
Otherwise known as famous.
Yeah. Comes out surrounded by like steam and smoke as well, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, I think probably the DeLorean has to be one of the most iconic movie cars.
Definitely. And he's asked Marty to film it all. So he's talking to the camera about this experiment he's going to be doing. Two watches in complete synchronization, and then he puts Einstein in the car. Einstein being his sort of shaggy dog. Not literally Einstein, that would be weird.
And no, look, I've traveled back in time. I actually got Albert Einstein.
It's all set up and pay off. I don't know where they set up Einstein being put in the car, but it's paid off. Yeah. And basically, I think one of the iconic shots of the film is the car coming towards them, lightning starting to encircle it, and then it just becoming two long flame trails.
Now, that effect hasn't aged well. All the stuff
No, it hasn't. Their feet are clearly not on the flames, are they?
No. I mean, their feet would literally be on fire, and they all just stood there like gazed. Like, no, you would be like, shit.
I've seen much worse. I have seen much worse, but that's where that doesn't look right. The flames were added sort of later, and then he explains what's been happening. Oh, basically to kill that minute till Einstein reappears. He sent Einstein 1 minute into the future.
And then it's like, so he sends, so basically to prove the experiment works, and he sort of asks him to film him basically sort of announcing that he's going to go into the
and
future.
Reloading it with plutonium, because you needed plutonium, not for the car, but for the time circuits, I think.
Yes. Conveniently only managing to get to load it at once. Because I forgot.
I didn't get any to come back. Yeah, that was it.
Yeah.
But it's played as absent-minded anyway. I know Christopher Lloyd mentions that he was very influenced by the conductor Leopold Stokowski.
Oh, okay.
It was very. He said that he saw Doc Brown as conducting the orchestra of the world, and that's why there's big theatrical movements in him. It was nearly John Lithgow. John Lithgow was first.
That would have been
choice.
immense.
It wouldn't have been better, would it? Would
No,
anyone have done this better than?
No, Christopher
I think
Lloyd was
it would have
actually
worked.
the first choice. Was the
John
best
Lithgow was
choice.
a great actor. I think it could have worked and it could have worked well, but I've struggled to believe that there are better casting choices for most of this
Just
film.
spot on, really spot on. I mean, it would have been different, but it would have been better. We don't know.
It would have been similar to what he did in Third Rock, I think.
I don't think I've ever seen Third Rock. I never watched
So
it.
funny! Oh my god, I love that show back in the day.
Yeah.
Hilarious.
Yeah, I think it'd be something similar towards that, but there's something
Like
just
zany.
inherently odd about Christopher Lloyd.
It's
that
just kind of
just
wild
works.
eyed
I mean,
look that he gives, doesn't he, and his hair and everything.
Well, the thing was what it's just the eccentricness of it, and just the thing that always makes me laugh, and it's just so random, is the bit where he basically says the line of the film, which is, "I'll send you back to the future," and he has almost like
And he just
it's
points and all that. It's great. That's what I'm saying. The other thing is, when I think of Christopher Lloyd playing this role, I think of Yoda in episode 2, where he strolls in like an old man, summons the Force, and is able to do these amazing things, and he's back to being an old man again. When you ever see Christopher Lloyd interviewed, he's one of the quietest, shyest men ever, and apparently he's genuinely like that. And yet you yell action, and suddenly he's
a complete
on.
other person comes out, doesn't he?
Yeah, he was the same right the way back to Taxi, and even It's a Wonderful Life. Sorry, even One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Yes.
He plays one of the kookier members of what are albeit mental health patients already.
That's a good film.
That's a fantastic film. It doesn't fit in any obvious series, unfortunately.
No. It's a
But
very
yeah.
good film.
Yeah, and they did. Oh, there is a Christmas tree. We might near the end. We might be able to summon it as
Kind of a Christmas, or we could do
It's a struggle.
Jack Nicholson series, or we could do I don't know.
You'd struggle with the Milos Forman.
I think we would. Milos Forman, maybe.
Yeah. But anyway.
Anyway, moving on.
But yeah, he's a real quiet, shy guy. I remember around the time, I think the third one came out, because it was Wogan. It was one of the Wogan episodes. Wogan was, Terry Wogan, for those of you not in this country, was a BBC television presenter for years. I don't know who your equivalent would be, but it was largely light entertainment. But he did during the 80s and very early 90s a thrice weekly interview show, 7 to 7:30 every night, and he would just interview people. It was all very light. He wasn't much of an interviewer, to be honest. But
I don't know about that, David.
I like him as a presenter and I like him as a guy, but I don't think interviewing was really his forte. But
he's more whimsical, really, more than anything.
He is. My earliest sort of exposure to him was his interview show, and so I didn't think much of him. But once he stopped doing that, and I just saw him in other things, I thought, yeah, actually, you got a real good way about you, and you're quite funny.
He's a radio host. He hosts Radio 2.
Radio was his first and greatest talent.
Definitely.
But he had Christopher Lloyd on one night, and I know it was the third one because Mary Steenburgen was the second guest. So 10 minutes into the show, he shifted over a seat and she came on. And he was so quiet, it was like pulling teeth. It was one of the dullest interviews I've ever seen, because he just didn't say very much. And to think that was the same guy who played Doc Brown is extraordinary. It's very like when you watch Rowan Atkinson. Rowan Atkinson, similarly, really boring interview. and yet able to summon this whole other persona when the camera rolls.
Yeah, no, it's. I always think like it's like Tommy Lee Jones as well. I mean, he's very uber serious,
But he can be funny. He can be hilarious.
but he's just very like
Like Jim Carrey now, he's gone kind of very serious and gone very kind of like
Well, he was never
what's going on
funny,
in the world.
so he might as well try something else.
Well, listen, maybe he's known for being kind of rubber-limbed and rubber-faced and putting these weird arm movements and all the rest of it. And then he's interviewed, he's kind of like, well, he's gone a very, very much like what's going on in the world, or else he's gone a bit weird. But yeah, no, definitely.
But yeah, so hang on a minute, where do we go from there? So he's basically, we find out that he was the one who's got the plutonium that, if you were paying attention at the start of the film, had been stolen.
Yeah.
And he's using it to power this machine, or certainly the time circuits.
Yeah, because he agreed to make a bomb for some terrorists. But this is actually a kids' film, so there's talk of making bombs for terrorists,
And Libyan terrorists were kind of the ISIS of their day. You quite often used to see about some act of Libyan terrorism at the time. And he's basically given them used pinball machine parts. Just the balls of this guy is extraordinary. But then the Libyans turn up.
They found me. I don't know how, but they found me. Like, wow, how? Like, did you not know your home address?
Well, he wasn't at his home address, was he?
No, that's true.
I can't
imagine it's a big town, though,
I'm not a great lover of somehow kind of plot points, but it works here because we just need an immediate panic, and them suddenly turning up out of nowhere would certainly fit the bill.
Yeah, I mean, like, chances are, if this generally happened, you wouldn't actually know, and you'd have to.
You wouldn't know why
you'd have to bend over backwards to try and explain that to the audience how it happened, and for the sake of it, or do you really need to know that much?
It's not impossible. He's in the town, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's still in. I was about to say Bedford Falls. This tells you a lot about how I see this film. He's still in Hill Valley. I mean, he's in a public place in Hill Valley, and he's not at home. They could have been driving around for hours looking for him.
Yeah.
To be fair. So I don't have a massive problem with it, but it is a point that, like, how would they have found him? Well, the film doesn't have time to tell us, and it doesn't actually matter.
Yeah. They turn up and they they shoot him
several times. It's kind of like an automatic or something. Yeah. They shoot him several times. He's on the floor, dead.
Plot point: good job didn't shoot him in the head though.
Yeah, I know. I mean, if you wore a bulletproof vest on your face, it would give the game away, wouldn't it? Marty dives into the car and is just at the start randomly almost driving around. He's randomly just trying to stay out of their way.
Yeah. Again, what's really works well about this is, like, you can just tell he's just thinking about getting away, and he completely forgets about the whole time traveling bit of the car.
Well, I do think "Let's see if you bastards can do 90" is ambiguous, because he's been told at 88. So is he doing that? No, he's too shocked when he gets to the past for it to be deliberate.
Yeah, he's just thinking, I need to get away. He's forgotten about the fact that and it might be he missed the fact that he's turned it on.
Panicking. Yeah, the circuits have to be switched on. That car does not necessarily time travel just when you do 88.
Yeah,
because the time circuits don't have to be on. So it's really well done. And of course, he immediately sparks into the past and drives straight into a tree.
Yeah, knocks out one of the twin pies.
Yeah, old Peabody's farm. And again, set up and payoff, because Doc was talking about that 5 minutes ago. I remember when this was all just fields as far as the eye could see. Old man Peabody owned this farm. Old farmland here.
And he drives straight into a shed and asks for help and then gets shot at.
Now, this is where the whole Spaceman from Pluto idea came from. Because this all influenced George's book later. You know, the DeLorean and all the rest of it, and Darth Vader and so on. But also... because the craft looks otherworldly, and when he comes back they think he's a spaceman. That's where he decided that this is what the film should have been called. Sid Sheinberg, great idea. I mean, he ran a major studio for years, so I don't want to ridicule the guy, but that wasn't a great idea.
So was the idea that it was called that because people from the 50s thought he was a spaceman?
Yes,
Right,
that's
okay.
exactly it, and it's based on obviously the book that George later goes to write, which is called. I don't think it's called Spaceman from Pluto at all, but whatever it's called, it's all related to that, and of course. It was Steven Spielberg's influence that got that stopped. The only other thing that's different is the character of Lorraine wasn't called Lorraine in the original script. She was called something else, like Mary or something.
That's one thing.
That was a Sid Sheinberg change. Because his wife is called Lorraine. We might find out who that lady is, actually, when we get to fun facts later.
That's fun fact. So where do we go? So he drives off again, doesn't he? And then
he just thinks it's a dream. And of course, what's surreal around it now is he's just driving. He's driving way too fast. His hands are really shaky on the wheel. This guy's having a full-on panic attack. And also the sun's rising, which makes it even more kind of surreal. The sun's rising. There's something about that makes it look even more surreal. And then he pulls over because he sees the entrance to Lyons Estates, which is where he lives.
which
But
is
there's
just surrounded by fields.
There's no houses there. There's just the beginnings of what will be the entrance to the estate. That's it. It's very like Hilldale later on. That Hilldale is in the 80s about to be built as this wonderful housing of the future that when it comes to it isn't that amazing. And this is the same. This is meant to be wonderful modern housing, but by the time it gets to the 80s, a loser like George is living there.
Just goes to show how times can change, can't it? All these grand ideas.
Yeah, the car cuts out as well.
Yeah, he runs out of petrol. Is it petrol?
I think so. The car just isn't working properly, and in fact, that endures throughout the trilogy. That the car's a bit unreliable going forward. And he tries to get a lift, but of course, he's dressed in basically a biohazard suit. So everyone's terrified. No, Wilbur, don't stop.
But also, like, a guy in strange clothes as well, just like, nope.
That's what I mean. It's what he's wearing. He's trying to get like a lift. He ends up having no choice but to just walk into town, which is like a couple of miles or something.
No, does he not take off the...
He does take it off and pushes the car behind, like the side of that house. Let's hope they aren't building that day.
Well, you know, he does disguise it very well with a few twigs.
Yeah. Stick a twig on it and I'll sort it out.
Yeah, so basically walks 2 miles into the town square.
Yeah.
Walks straight into the cafe or diner.
Is that before he goes into the square? Doesn't he go into the square and grab a newspaper? He grabs a newspaper out of the bin because he walks in and I think the Ballad of Davy Crockett is playing. Or is it Mr. Sandman? No, I think it's Mr. Sandman. The Ballad of Davy Crockett's playing in the cafe. So yeah, Mr. Sandman's playing, and you get shots of like, and also that theatre, which has some sort of soft porn film in it later, has got a Ronald Reagan film playing. So Ronald Reagan's still an actor at this point. And then someone drops a newspaper into the bin, and he picks it up and sees the date, and it's November 5th, 1955.
And he do that sort of wide shot, and then
I think he goes into the cafe.
Yeah. He goes in, as for a tab, he says, like, well, you don't get one, so you at least you order
Oh,
something.
yeah.
Yeah, because he means tab, the drink.
Yeah.
Tab, yeah, definitely.
Which
Yeah,
lasts
there's-
about 5 minutes in this country in the 80s. But yeah.
I quite
Tab
enjoyed Tab,
clear.
but it tastes like
Tab
Coke,
clear.
but it was clear.
Yeah, it was, yeah. But anyway, he wants that. He ends up just basically having a coffee, because he asks for a Pepsi Free next, and it's like, there's no such thing.
No such
It's
thing as
the
Pepsi Free
1950s.
yet.
And then he goes to get...
Oh, he sees Goldie as well, doesn't he?
yeah, and he also
Basically
goes...
convinces him to become mayor.
yeah,
Yeah.
he gets Doc's number first.
That's the one.
Out of the thing, so he knows where to go to find him.
Yeah.
And then he sees his father in there,
Niels.
and they're pulling the same expression as Biff walks in the door.
As I say, one is like, don't ever see, go back in here.
And fly, we can get that all the way through.
Fly. And they both go, huh? No, it's a very funny scene. There's a lot of random 80s references like Tab and Pepsi and stuff like that, and it's very anachronistic. But yeah, it's good fun. Obviously, you see the meeting between Marty and McFly Jr. and McFly Sr. And you can see Crispin Glover disappear out from that mound of makeup and grey hair. Because I think there's only about 4 or 5 years between them.
Yeah, they're all aged up. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. But no, yeah. So we're seeing like between Biff basically getting wailed on. No, not Biff even. George getting wailed on by Biff. But yeah, I love the whole 50s dynasty. I think it's very cool. It's an iconic scenes. I think it's just where we see Match as well. Billy Zane in the background, one of the stooges.
Billy Zane is one of his sort of gang, if you like.
Yeah. Obviously got 3D, who's wearing 3D glasses.
Yeah, 3D glasses. Yeah, another 50s reference as well. But yeah, obviously it's one of those films that you have a lot of callbacks to as well. And obviously he meets Goldie. It basically drops the seed of the idea for him to become mayor. It's like, oh yeah, I'll become mayor.
A coloured mayor.
And the guy's like, it'll never happen. It's like, well, actually, you'd be surprised.
I do wonder whether like the place is better off with Goldie, because I'm not sure he's done that good a job considering.
No, that's it.
Because seeing everything's like sort of gone down a pan, like the cinema's like
all
a
those
porn.
years of training by like mopping floors.
Yeah, he's kind of like, I'll get out of this.
Certainly, the mayor at this point is Mayor Red Thomas. Now, there's two things about this. Firstly, all the spiel about him, more jobs, lower. It's politics, and first off, it's the inherent farce of political campaigning in that they're promised loads more spending and lower taxes, which is impossible, generally speaking. Also, it's the very same sort of stuff that's being said about is being said for Goldie later. The third point is that people have erroneously suggested that Red Thomas later becomes that bum Red from the future or from the 1980s, and it isn't. Firstly, Marty improvised that line when he called him Red. And secondly, it's not the same guy. It's just not the same guy. It's not the same actor or anything.
No, it just happens to be called Red.
Yes. And again, it was improvised, not in the script, so it's just a coincidence anyway.
Yeah, and then so you get the whole scene with Biff, and Biff asking why I've done my homework, we're flying, we're home, your shoes untied and all that. And then darts off, and Marty's just there still gawking at his dad.
Yeah, well, he notices that his dad sort of disappears before he notices him, so he follows him and shouts, and I love that. From a comic timing perspective, hey, Dad, you on the bike? George, Dad, you on the bike, or whichever way round it is. And of course, we don't realise, but it's all set up in payoff, because the next time we see George, he's in a tree, looking in a window at some woman in quite a massive bra, it has to be said.
It's very big.
It's very big. But yeah, he's basically a peeping Tom, which Marty actually says in dialogue.
Yeah, a bit pervy.
And then he falls out of the tree into the path of a car, and Marty, without thinking, pushes him out of the way. Now, of course, they met when George was hit by a car, and now Marty's been hit by the car. And so that's all set up and pay off again. The other thing is, that sound effect of Marty's head hitting the road still goes through me.
Does it?
Yeah.
I can't think of it if I try and think of it.
It just sounds painful. And I thought, And then when I think now, because he's got a neurological disorder as well, but of course it was added as Foley work anyway. I doubt his head hit the road that hard.
No, that would have probably killed him.
Yeah. So now Marty is in Lorraine's bed. When it should have been George.
Yeah, I mean, this was kind of like controversial at the time. I imagine like reviews were kind of like, is this acceptable?
It's always going to be a bit controversial, isn't it? Because that's kind of where the sort of the tension is, and some of the comedy as well. But as long as the fact that he's called Calvin Klein because of the name on his underpants.
Well, just to go back a step, when they were, I don't want to take too long out of the run of the film, but This was something like their fourth film, Gale and Zemeckis. They made a film they made Used Cars and I Want to Hold Your Hand, and both of those were funded by Steven Spielberg. They were huge flops, or he at least produced them. So they wanted to make their name. So they went off, and the film that this is really the success. The film whose success this is reliant on, effectively, was Romancing the Stone. Romancing the Stone was a big hit, big Bob Zemeckis film, and suddenly this film's back in play. But they went round all the studios trying to get this made, and it was turned down by virtually everyone on the basis that stuff like Porky's was being made. This was all a bit safe and tame, with the exception of Disney, who were the exact opposite. Disney said, we cannot make a film where his mother wants him sexually. So it's really funny. It was controversial, but it was only controversial with the main Disney studio. Everyone else saw it as relatively tame, and it was made in the 80s, not the 40s, for goodness sake. I think it's just seen for what it is, humour. She doesn't know who he is.
No. Yeah, it's that awkward kind of oh no.
Yeah.
But she does deliver I've got come fuck me eyes, but she does.
Well, I also love where are my pants? Over there. Pause. A couple of shallow breaths on my hope chest.
I'm sure she's even licking her lips as well, looking.
Yeah, there are. Yeah, then she ate slowly at a banana.
Sitting quiet in the corner, staring at me eating a banana. Yeah.
There are shots of Eric Stoltz in this scene as well. This is one of the ones Eric Stoltz did film originally.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm finding you a screenshot now while we're talking. But yeah, and then he goes down to dinner and meets his future sort of family, effectively.
Yeah, and it's all kind of, he gets usual life preserver joke as he's the sailor, and that TV program still playing on, brand new.
Yeah, Jackie Gleason. This is the one that this is a classic. This is the one where Ralph meets the man from space, and it's like, how have you seen it? It's brand new. And it's like, well, I saw it on a rerun. What's a rerun? You'll find out. And that kid talking to him is later becomes Kevin Arnold's older brother in the Wonder Years, Jason Hershey. First TV as well, and of course he tells them he's got 2 TVs, and of course they don't believe that at all. You must be rich. And the conversation is really awkward because you've got Lorraine saying he can stay in my room, touching his knee under the table, and him saying, oh, he wants to go to Maple or Sycamore or whatever it is where Doc lives, and he's then going, yeah, it's up by John F. Kennedy Drive, and it's like, who the hell is John F. Kennedy? By this point, John F. Kennedy would have been a senator, and he had won the Pulitzer Prize for Profiles in Courage, but it kind of worked as a joke. He wasn't super famous.
Yeah, not everyone will necessarily know who he is.
No, I mean, we are talking 5 years before he was elected. So yeah, I guess that works okay.
Yeah. And especially at that time as well, we haven't got the media that we have now.
You wouldn't know every senator necessarily, but no. Yeah, it's just worth pointing out that he wasn't a complete unknown at this point because, as I say, he'd won the Pulitzer Prize. I think he had anyway, and he was already in the Senate. I think he was elected in '54.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he heads off for Doc.
Yeah, and not before her father sort of tells her oh, if you have a kid like that, I'll just own you.
Yeah, and also we see Joey get used to these bars kids.
Yeah.
Kid.
Yeah. So they goes
Uncle
Doc,
Joey, Jobber Joey,
and then Christopher Lloyd acting eccentric as he is, really.
The thing is, as well, on every version of this film I'd ever seen until 2010, because I hadn't seen it on the big screen, I thought the joke was meant to be he looked exactly the same. The guy never aged, but he is actually younger here.
Yeah, you can clearly see he's more fresh-faced.
The other thing is, I think that they put a lot of lines around his eyes and on his neck. But the other thing as well is, did Doc burn this down for the insurance money?
Probably.
Well, that's some fine insights, folks.
Yes, he did.
Right, brilliant. I love this scene. He knocks on the door, Doc opens it, and immediately drags him in the door.
Well, no, he doesn't. He closes it.
For a split second.
Yeah. Opens it again. And then
looks around. Drags him in and puts this plunger on his head. Because he wants to read his mind.
Yeah. He goes for the whole thing where he guesses incorrectly, and then Marty just tells him all this stuff.
You want me to make what was it? The Women's Youth Auxiliary or something like that.
You want me to buy a subscription to?
Yeah.
Women's Youth Auxiliary. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's awesome. And he pulls it off his head to tell him the truth. That's actually really awesome.
He tells him, like, look, you sent me. I'm from the future. You sent me the time machine. I need you to get me back. Do you know what this means?
And of course, this thing doesn't work at all. But I love as he starts, he walks him out the door and he says, "Okay, tell me, future boy, who's president of the United States in 1985?" And of course, it's the one era in history where the answer you would give would sound ridiculous. A B-movie actor.
Yeah.
I mean, he's playing in a film that's on in the main town at the moment.
Yeah.
Queen of Montana or something. And who's Vice President? Jerry Lewis? I suppose Jane Wyman is First Lady, because that's obviously his first wife, who was also an actress.
Yeah, I can't see that joke working as well. Oh, possibly with Trump, if he made it now. It'd be like, what, Trump's president?
Well, yeah,
that jackass.
That guy who runs casinos, it would have been if it had been 30 years ago, yeah.
But I think that's the only real thing I can really think that'll work if he remade it.
There's not really anything quite like it.
No. But, yeah, no.
Although, having said that, again, it does support the shifting timeline of the film. That I've read versions where they say it was always 1955, and then I've read versions where they said no, it was always 30 years before. He married Nancy Reagan in 1952, so who would have been First Lady Jane Wyman? He divorced her 6 years before. So minor things, but there are a few anachronistic jokes in it. Yeah, so he shuts him out and says, "Good night, future boy." But of course, set up and payoff. Earlier on, Doc had been saying about the time when he invented time travel.
Mm.
And he said that he was standing on the toilet to hang a clock, slipped, hit his head, and when he came round, he had a vision of this, and it was the flux capacitor.
And the way Michael J. Fox delivers it, it's literally just like, I'm just desperately saying anything now.
I've just got to say, yeah.
You know, it's, you can kind of feel like it's almost like hopeless now. It's like, I'm not even convinced.
Well, even by the end of the story, he's losing momentum. He's just like, which is what makes time travel possible. You know, it's like he's done by then. Yeah, it was Cattle Queen of Montana. I've just looked it up. That was the film playing in the square. I did actually remember that correctly, which is unusual because I can never remember that title. But yeah, he opens the door and shows him the picture. He's like this. You mean this? Of course, he later shows him it in the car.
Mm.
So Doc's on board.
So Doc's now a believer. So they're telling them all about it. Did he pick up the car, or did he have a conversation first?
They have a conversation first because he said he starts talking about plutonium.
Yeah. And
that's where he says, I think he plays him some of the video actually, and it's the 1.21 gigawatts.
Well, he had to pick up the car first, wouldn't he? Because
yes, they must have done. I can't really remember. Considering I know this film like the back of my hand, I've seemed to have forgotten that bit. But anyway, the point is, they're showing him a bit of the video, and he hears himself say the 1.21 gigawatts.
1.21 gigawatts!
And he's brilliant in that bit. And he said, well, we just need some plutonium. And it's like, well, I'm sure you can get it in every corner store in 1985, but it's a little harder to come by now. And that's where he says about you need a bolt of lightning.
Yeah.
Which is just, again, brilliant, because he's got the exact time that's going to happen written on something in his pocket.
Yeah, as if, I mean, all this might feel forced, but it's something. I think what's really great about this film, and I don't know if you noticed, there's a really good rhythm. It's quite fast pacing. It has a nice sort of rollingness about it. It goes dead quick. so the dialogue runs off like almost like so efficiently. Like,
yes, it's got a very even pace.
yeah, it just like I mean, so a lesser filmmaker or lesser writer would have made that feel a little bit forced, but this kind of like goes at it's so efficient and so pacey at delivering it that you kind of go, okay, well this is working, yeah, that's fine. It just goes through everything. So yeah, it's a really sort of hypnotic pace almost. So you just kind of like you just go with it. What's next? So yeah, so they figure out what they're gonna do, and then he
basically says to him, "I'm afraid you've basically got to stay here for a week."
Yeah.
And it's like, well, great, I can hang out, you can show me around the place, and all the rest of it. It's like, no, you can't. Have you interacted with your parent? You can't interact with anyone.
Yeah.
You haven't, have you? And it's, well, I may have bumped into my parents. And it's like, and then he says about, I can't remember what they say, but he was talking about.
No, another thing, he shows him the picture, at first. This is like before they established that, and he sort of said, "Oh, that's a fake one. The hands are missing."
That's a fakery because the head's missing.
Oh, but yeah, no, I think he says a hand at first.
I think it's his hair, actually.
Okay,
I think Dave's hair is missing, and when we next see it, it's his whole.
And
head.
it's so throwy because we don't notice it.
Yeah, because you only see it for a split second, but we are getting different versions of that picture each time.
So yeah, and then he figures out, and he looks at the picture again, and he starts seeing. They're now starting to fade. So and that's when he figured out, okay, we need
your
to correct it.
Your presence here, and he's like, well, they meet and they go to the enchantment and the sea dance and all the rest of it. They met when he hit him. Her dad hit him with the car, hit me with the car.
Yeah.
Try that one again.
So it's So he's basically got to go to school and start trying to get them back together. So having been told he can't
and
interact
hilarity
with
issues.
Yeah, and the first thing we see, he actually sees George. He said, "Which one's your father?" And it's like, that one. And he's got a sign saying "Kick me" on his back.
Yeah.
Oh god, that's awful. And George is just like he's so spineless through it all. He's like, oh, okay, that's good fun. Yeah, just. Oh,
I didn't notice this till recently, but is one of those guys kicking him up the backside that kid who tries to steal a rain at the dance?
I don't know, is the honest fact. Could probably. This film is so tightly made that way, I would think so. But I've never noticed.
Yeah, just something that I sort of thought, because it's so blinky you miss it. But anyway, so he tries to introduce George to Lorraine, and that just doesn't work. Because Lorraine's just like, oh, okay.
Not interested. She just doesn't even see George, really.
Yeah.
She walks straight past him.
Isn't he
Marty.
a dreamboat?
And it's like, and then the shock and worry on Doc's face is brilliant after that. It's totally like, oh god. Come on, we need them to go to some sort of ritual event. What do your parents like to do? Nothing. And actually, that's kind of how we all see our parents, because they don't tend to have hobbies by the time we come along and reach a certain age.
Yeah. They're just sort of like, oh, it's just mum and dad.
Yeah, they've just sort of slipped into whatever their daily rhythm is. So typically when it's like, what do they like to do? Nothing. But he's got to hang around until this dance. So it's now focused around the enchantment onto the sea dance. That's effectively, they have to be together by then. So it's almost like a ticking clock. They've got to be together by then and kiss at that dance.
And then have to be there in DeLorean as the thing gets struck by lightning. So where do we go from there? He talk to George again?
But he keeps trying to sort of hang around with George to get George to ask Lorraine out. And like George is like, she's not interested. I think he goes up to her. I think he goes up.
But he thinks like she's interested in Biff, which is kind of like.
And quite clearly, Biff is because he's in the canteen, basically trying to touch her up, but very boorishly. Not
like manhandling her, basically.
Up, but it's manhandling. It's not slyly trying to touch someone up. It's very open, very blatant, and very unwelcome. And again, it's problems I'll have with the sequel because the exaggeration on the Biff character does get a bit ridiculous. But at this point, it's a bully that no one has ever sort of punched back on. So his perception of his own right to do whatever he wants is pretty much unlimited.
So,
they have. That's what it is. They end up, and also he does. He tells him to leave her alone, and they do square up at each other. So there's now antipathy between Marty and Biff.
And then Sinclair gets in just in time, and he sort of, I'll
Strickland, yeah.
Sorry, Strickland. Comes in and basically breaks.
Sinclair drives in his C5.
And then he sort of Biff sort of says, "I'll give you a break since you new here.
Why don't you make like a tree and get out of here?" Which never made any sense, but I never questioned until the sequel.
I think they were improvised, weren't they?
I don't know if it was or not, but I doubt it. This script was so well written, I'd be very surprised if it's improvised. But you may be right.
I think obviously Biff was not as clever to go make like a tree and leave.
Yeah, but make like a tree and get out of here. I never questioned, even though it's quite clearly bullshit. It was like, oh.
I think it's just to establish that the guy isn't like the smartest guys.
No, it's...
Yeah.
I mean, I'm surprised he didn't sort of go back on that when he gets corrected, like leave, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. So basically we got a week or so of this now. We've got Marty trying to get them together and it not working out. She's only interested in him. She even turns up at Doc's place and asks, basically implies she wants him to take her.
Yeah. And then so does that happen later on, or does that happen before or after the diner?
The diner. No, he goes into the diner. I think the diner's first. He goes in to talk to her at the diner, and Biff ruins it.
Yeah. So he Marty gives him convince him to sort of try again and give him
and gives him his dialogue.
Yeah. It's like you are
You're my
destiny.
density.
You are my density. No, what does he say?
The way crispy.
Something like you shall pop up in me, or not like that, but something like that.
Fate has popped me to you.
Yeah, you pop me to you. That's the one.
And I like, the way Crispin Glover delivers that's really quite sweet.
Yeah,
actually, when he corrects himself and says, "I mean, my destiny." He's got such a sweet voice.
He has. He's very lovely.
There's a really nice reaction because before that, there was a sense of like, okay, well, the romance between George and Lorraine was kind of like lightning in a bottle because of as Christopher Lloyd Doc says, it's like the nurse's syndrome or something like that. When a
nurse falls in love with the patient, or vice versa.
Kind of thing. So you think,
it used to happen on battlefields and stuff. Yeah,
that could only have happened in that search, and it's obviously how are you possibly going to reenact that? So before then is like, this is going to literally be impossible, and but with that scene, you almost sort of see her heart kind of melt when he says that. I was like, and then Biff comes in. And then Biff comes in, and then Marty kind of does this hero thing, which completely distracts Lorraine.
Yeah, invents skateboarding. Knocks Biff out and invents skateboarding.
Yeah.
The people were around with scooters, though. I mean, they did sort of modify a scooter.
Yeah, that's all it is. I mean, they were just, effectively. But it's a great sequence the first time because he's making it up as he goes along. And whilst I like the fact it rhymes in the sequels, over time, I can see where, it doesn't work as well. Partly because we've already seen it. But partly because he is genuinely making it up as he goes along here. Because, of course, there's now 4 or 5 of them get straight in the car and chase him. And you get the impression... See, I don't know that Biff's meant to be the murderer that he then becomes in the second one. But at the same time, he's lost his head. He might do Marty some serious damage, if you know what I mean, before. Because they're chasing him in a car. What's the end game of that? Pinning him against something? running him over.
I don't know. I think it's that hothead meathead mentality.
Exactly. I don't actually think it works when he's later a murderer. And he's not really a rapist either. He's kind of just got carried away. It is a sexual assault later in the film. I'm not arguing with that. But it's a little bit exaggerated. It's taken a bit too far in the sequels.
I think you can... I mean, to us, I have to watch the sequels, but if you're thinking about future Biff Tannen, you could say he grew into that because of the circumstances.
Oh, yeah,
He's like, he just kind of... It's almost like when someone is allowed to prosper with those morals, shall we say, it's only going to get worse. So you could say,
Yeah, it is sort of nature and nurture. I get it. Yeah, I do get that.
But you might be right in terms of like other aspects. So where are we now? So we do the classic thing where he sort of does the cool thing by sort of just letting the skateboard go into the car.
She's like, so she's desperate for him to take her. She even turns up, as I say, at Doc's place. At the same time, he's now got to get George interested. George is now completely defeated again, and they're talking about, and he also says that he don't want to go because he's watching Mystery Science Theatre that night or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So then basically Marty gets the idea of wearing all the kit and pretending to be some kind of, alien.
Yeah. And while pissing off two very strong sci-fi fans.
He's Darth Vader from the planet Vulcan. This was originally a longer scene, and it does lead to continuity errors because sometimes he's got the hairdryer in his belt and sometimes he doesn't. And it's because it was a longer scene that actually ended with him chloroforming George, which pays off in the next... Well, we didn't chloroforming and bum him or anything. This is his survival that's necessary, to be fair. But also it led on to the scene where he said that he overslept in the next scene, where he runs up to him and says, didn't see you in school, so that's why. But it got cut because it just wasn't necessary, and it was too long. But he plays him Van Halen.
Oh.
Or is it James Van Halen?
Something like that.
I think isn't the actual music is just the guitar player just riffing. It was recorded.
Eddie Van Halen.
Edward Van Halen. Sorry.
Yes.
And he's just. I think it's literally just him riffing on a guitar. I think it's not actually off an actual Van Halen song.
Right. Yeah. But anyway, it's got George convinced. George runs over to him next and says, "We got to sort this out." And I love the little visual gag here. He's fighting like fuck to get that bottle open. Yeah. He's trying to open a bottle of Coke and George just grabs it from him and just uses the bottle opener and hands it right back. Lots of little touches. These are people, I think, that have lived with this script for a very long time. Yeah. They know how they want to execute it. But not only that, they've kept iterating on it. They've kept adding that little bit of flavour with each pass they've taken at it. And spotted obvious ideas on set each day. I just think it's really, really terrific.
It's something that's been constantly evolving, hasn't it? I think I get the impression that it's always kind of been, rather than just being like a static document.
Those sorts of things don't tend to be in first drafts.
No, exactly. It takes time.
But so now the plan is he's going to basically park up with her, try it on, and then George is going to come to her rescue. Which is immediately a flawed plan because this woman is desperately horny for him anyway. So it's the idea that she'll be outraged. I already recognise this as a shit idea. And what I love is George obviously not being an actor because he goes to him, "You're lying, George," and he goes, "Hey, you, get your damn hands off her." It's just wonderful. Think I swear? Yes, God damn it, George, swear. I love it.
Yeah.
It's really...
Oh, so funny.
So it's not far from there to actually getting to the night. I'm sure we've missed some stuff out, but we've hit the major beats.
We probably have, but we've hit the main beats.
I don't know, it is a pretty lean film, really.
It is a pretty lean film, and it's only a couple of hours as well.
Nothing to it is nothing to it. Nothing in this film isn't drag. It's all, everything that needs to be there is there. It's essential. It zips by. It's got a real sense of pace. It rattles along at a really good pace. It's very quick. It's very quick on the mark. It's funny.
But I love this as well. And it's the payoff of dialogue, because earlier on she said about, I've never sat in a parked car with a boy, or girls and I do. And he pulls up and he says, "Do you want to just park?" Which he thinks his mum's going to go absolutely not to, and she's like, "Yeah, coat off, fucking nice cleavage showing." Booze and fags straight out.
She does have a lovely dress in this film, I will say.
She does.
I love like the 50s fashion.
Yeah, Thompson was so cute at this age. She was about 24 at the time, the actress, but yeah.
So young. I think they were probably older than...
They're older than their characters.
They're older than the characters. Well, they're still older than the characters.
Yeah.
I like Joe Fox. He's blessed with those good genes. That now he looks, not very old at all, considering his advanced years.
Well, he's not well either.
Parkinson's too, but no, he still looks good though. But yeah, as everyone has good for Parkinson's, which is very important work that he does.
Biff's now furious as well, because that big sort of car chase earlier on ended up with his car being filled with manure.
Oh, stinky.
Was that real manure? No, it wasn't.
I will put that, actually, listeners, this, if you like, I'll play it now, is the... he was asked so many questions over the years, including would there be a Back to the Future 4 and all the rest of it, that Thomas F. Wilson does stand-up, and he took to singing a song that would just answer all of the questions. And here it is.
When I'm flying in a plane or I'm on the street, there's a lot of famous people that I like to meet. They shake my hand and never ask my name, and they start asking questions that are always the same. Hey, what's Michael J. Fox like? He's nice. What's Michael J. Fox like? Nice guy. What's Michael J. Fox like? He's an alien. Stop asking me the question. I went to the bar mitzvah of my nephew Josh. Now I'm not Jewish, but I like to nosh. Put on my yarmulke, started to pray, when the rabbi leaned over and I heard him say, "Hey, was that real manure?" "No, it wasn't." "Was that real manure?" "No." "Was that real manure?" "It's a movie. Stop asking me the question. Can we take your picture? Come on, look mean. Would you call my friend a butthead on his answering machine? Hey, questions, just fill my head. I went to my doctor said, "Hey, what does a key grip do? Set up lights." "What does the best boy do? Help the key grip." "What does a producer do?" "I don't know." Stop asking me the question. Do you all hang out together? No, we don't. How's Crispin Glover? Never talk to him. Back to the Future 4, not happening. Stop asking me the question. Hey, who's the nicest famous guy you know? Adam Sandler. Who is the biggest jerk? Gary Busey. How much money do you make? More than you do. So stop asking me the question. Thanks a lot, everybody. Thanks for coming out. God bless. Good night.
Stop asking me the questions.
I know, it's great, isn't it? Really funny, that song. But I love it's got a real nice flow to it as well. But yeah, so Biff's now out for blood. It cost $300 in 1955 money to fix his car. He's been embarrassed in public. So Marty has got someone wanting to beat him up, someone want to fake beat him up, and he's got to try and avoid his mum actually jumping him. It's really awful.
Yeah, so it takes a while. Kind of, you can imagine Marty thinking this plan's not going well, is it?
I love it when he says yeah, and he's just like, huh? It's just like totally not what he's expecting when he asks if she wants to park.
I mean, at first she's like drinking, and then she's smoking. Like, Mom.
And I just love the fact that he gets again. He's great at varying within sentences, even. We said about it earlier where he says that's what makes time travel possible, and he's losing heart through saying it.
Yeah.
He can spin on a dime within a sentence. It's the fact where he says, you can tell the guy thinking, the character thinking, because, I mean, he says to her, you shouldn't drink. And it's like, he then has to follow it up with, because you may regret it later in life. And as he starts saying that, you can almost see the character thinking, Christ, this sounds really fucking lame. And he goes, and as he says it, it just comes out as, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I've just said that." It's really great. Jesus, you smoke too?
He's really shocked by it all.
Spitting on the dashboard. And then she always feels like kissing my brother. That makes sense. Yeah.
She basically does jump him in the end, where he says, "Do you ever find yourself in a situation where you've got to act a certain way and you're not sure if you can go through with it?" And it's basically because he realises that in a minute he's got to create a commotion that makes sense when, like, George opens the car and pulls him out and beats him up. Fake beats him up. And of course she takes it as a cue to, like, come on to him. She kisses him, he freezes entirely. And this was in response to them not knowing how to get Marty out of this. That line, "It's like kissing my brother," took several passes at the script for them to come to. And then they were like, perfect, that completely takes the steam out of it. She's no longer attracted to him. He's not going to be forced to make a difficult choice.
Yeah, it makes sense as well. Almost, it's like you can kind of go, okay, well,
almost like genetically, you know?
Yeah, almost like sort of like sensing it almost. So
I have to say though, if my mother looked like that, I'd be confused.
I know it will be the most like confused boner ever, wouldn't it? It'll be
just, what do I do with this? The door opens, and again, just so much thought's gone into every scene.
He thinks it's going to be.
He's got a real resigned look to him, like, "Here we go then," and he's hauled out the car, and it's Biff. And Thomas F. Wilson is fucking scary here.
Terrifying.
Becca's catchphrase there.
Terrifying.
I know. I really want to have like a sting for that.
I thought it was...
Like
I thought Becca's catchphrase was like, "Hey, you."
Yeah, that one.
So he's basically taken and thrown in the back of a car that happens to have an open boot, and it's the band's bar, a band's car. They're sat in it, having a little bit of a puff, which is quite funny because he says, "I don't want any trouble with some. This don't concern you, spook," which is a racial epithet. And then he says, "I don't want any trouble with any reefer addicts." And I just love that we're in an era where like anti-drug propaganda made everyone think marijuana was like addictive and would like mess you up and stuff. And it's now Biff in the car with her when George strolls up ready to do his little part. And just because he's such a deliberately awkward actor and really mannered, and it's just brilliant. Comedically, it's brilliant. This guy walking up going, "Right, here we go." And when he opens the car door, it's Biff.
And because of the size of it, I don't know how tall he really is, but he
always... Thomas F. Wilson?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if there was talk of a recast. Obviously, he wouldn't have been as much taller than Eric Stoltz, of course. I'm just looking him up to see if I can. It's really weird looking at him now. He's 6'2.5".
Oh, because that's reasonably tall, isn't it? That's quite...
Well, it's reasonably... It's not a giant, but it's tall, and it's tall again. It's tall in 1955, if you think, because average heights would have been a bit less. And we're talking about a 1955 character. But also, it's tall against a 5'5" actor. He's 9.5 inches taller than him. That's significant.
Yeah. What, which one? Michael J. Fox?
Michael J. Fox, I am aware. I was talking about Crispin Glover before that. I'm just looking up Crispin to see how tall he is. It's difficult to tell with Crispin Glover because he's quite slight.
Mm.
So the natural thought is to think he's quite tall, but he may not be. He's 5'10". So not wildly tall. I mean, in Hollywood terms, fairly, but yeah, 5'10", not a giant.
Yeah, so Biff's still taller, but they always seem to shoot him as kind of, or it seems like towering over everyone, which is always in that sort of cartoon kind of way, like, you know, you always see like Looney Tunes and things like that. I think this is probably like, if I had to put money on like everyone's favourite scene of Back to the Future, it'd probably be this.
I don't know. Do you know, for all the love I've got of this film, I don't think I've ever even really thought about that. I've never been asked the question, so I don't know. I don't think I've ever thought about it.
I guess maybe the the dance with the guitar and things like that, maybe.
I mean, yeah, when we get to the dance in a minute, there's a couple of bits of that. I mean, my mother almost collapsed laughing at that scene. We'll come to it later.
Yeah.
But it's just great storytelling because you've got Biff's in the car, George is there. George is now effectively grabbed by the arm and is in danger of having it broken. Lorraine's terrified for him, and the other thing is they've got to break Marty out of that car. The people breaking him out are the band, and they hurt their hand getting him out. And the cars of that era do look pretty solid, so that's quite realistic.
It's almost like all the keys are in the boot as well.
Yeah, it's Marvin Berry as well. Chuck Berry's cousin, I think. Chuck Berry's cousin, I think. So that leads to how it's inventing rock and roll. So now somebody's got to play guitar for them. Biff's got a decision to make.
Actually, that is probably one of my favourite scenes because of the Family Guy parody.
Oh yeah. We'll get to that because there's a bit I really like about that.
Yeah, you'll have to tell me about it because I'm not sure I've seen the episode, although it might ring a bell when you tell me.
So basically Marty dashes out because Biff's in the car.
But I love the fact that I don't know that there's ever been a better actor at playing panic. Not fear, I mean comedic panic, than Michael J. Fox. Because he gets out of the car and it's like, if they can't play, they can't kiss. And if they can't kiss, they don't fall in love and I'm history. And you just think, like, that can only ever come out in panic. Because if you calmly said that to someone, they'd be, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah,
they'd be like, what the bloody hell? That sounds crazy.
But that's already been set up as well. Not that specific bit of conversation, but we've seen Marty panicking and not necessarily explaining himself properly early on.
And then so then we sort of cut between that and what's happening with the car and Biff's really manhandling, like pretty much on the verge of rape, and then George comes and does his thing.
I love the way that's shot.
Yeah.
Because it plays up the otherworldliness of George a little bit. You can see why he was a bit of a strange fish in school. Because he looks odd. They use almost like a fisheye camera sort of thing on him as he's looking around and balling his fist up. They're putting some kind of weird echo on Thomas F. Wilson's laughing.
Yeah.
It's kind of, I wouldn't say it's scary. Becca would say it's terrifying, obviously.
Terrifying.
Terrifying. But
they viciously pushed her down on a bum. I'd always wonder, like, you think there would have been in some scripts where he actually did hit her?
Possibly.
Because I keep expecting that.
That wouldn't take long to cut out, though. I mean, he sort of does in the second one, doesn't he? In alternate 85. But yeah, George really, what I love about that as well is it's a nice shorthand for George is really keen on her. Now, you would defend a woman anyway, but his reaction is to her being pushed to the floor. He doesn't care about himself. So many ways you can read that, actually. He doesn't care about himself. It's only when somebody else is threatened he acts. But it's also that it's her.
I think what adds to it as well, that he's actually laughing. He pushes down the floor and he's like laughing.
He's had enough now of being laughed at and all
well,
the
rest he's laughing at Lorraine.
Yes, but both.
Yeah.
Both, yeah. And it just ends and the music build, or the music builds up on it.
The fist clenches.
Yeah, the fist clenches and he knocks him out. Which I love.
Yeah, the timing of it as well. You see it, and then Marty, and literally just sort of, and then literally just as that happens, Marty sort of like comes in just see it himself, and then
because he's just got out of the car,
and it's just, and I think it's that moment for me.
He races back to see that, then he goes back to say, "You've got to play." But yeah, he sees it just in time. It's great,
and yeah, I think it's just that sort of, it's that time when his dad came through for him. It would have been like everything would have been lost had George done the thing that he normally would have done.
The other thing is, all the way through the film, we do get occasional looks at that picture. They're fading. Marty is quite close to his own life force starting to fade out. Yeah,
that's kind of like your your timer, really, isn't it? That's kind of like the race against time element, literally.
Yeah.
Countdown to disaster.
So he goes back to beg them to play, and then the next thing you see he's on stage playing very stiffly himself, which again is just a wonderful move of Michael J. Fox.
He's brilliant, isn't he?
But of course they're singing Earth Angel, which wasn't the
Super
same.
Free.
Well, yes, but also they're playing the song, but it's also scored orchestrally by Alan Silvestri as well. So you've got it building up to them kissing as well. So when he sings "Love is out of your happiness" and all that bit, it builds up, and when you hear it on the sequel, that build up isn't there, so it doesn't sound right. I'm so used to hearing it with the orchestration on it as well.
Yeah.
But the bit where they kiss, the bloke cuts in and Marty's fading out. He's literally fading. You can see through his own hand.
Yeah, like.
And then George actually was walking away, but he obviously changes his mind, comes back, pushes the guy out of the way, leans in and kisses her.
One of the most annoying ginger guys ever. As well.
I know.
Oh, they're so annoying.
Ginger bastard.
Do you think that guy is one that gave Gingers a bad name?
I don't. Probably. It's all started in 1955. I would not have pointed out his gingerness, and that is not the policy of Do You Expect Us to Talk to do so. Chris
No.
Speaking for himself.
No, it's not.
But it's a very common thing where people mock gingers.
With ginger bastard just for comedy effect.
Ginger bastard. Oh my god.
Yeah, so he kissed her, and the bit where Marty springs up is fantastic. And I thought my mum was going to hurt herself laughing at that the first time we saw it. Because I was only about, I must have been about 11. Something like that. And the way she laughed when he sprung up was brilliant.
So after Mark McFly nearly dies, does the whole shuffling in the corner, watch his hand fade away.
Yeah. And manages back up hilariously. But also, actually, the way the music swells is
it's almost just been given like adrenaline. It's like...
Yeah. But he's not controlling himself either. It's great. It's wonderful. It's really well done. And this is the only bit coming up that doesn't really advance plot or character particularly. Although theoretically he does invent rock and roll.
I could say that one of the faults, and it is a minor fault of this film, is that the whole kissing bit and the dance is a kind of like a repeat of what we just seen to an extent,
What, in other words, George having to make the decision to step in to kiss her, how is that different from him taking the decision to knock Biff out? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, similar sort of.
In some respect, he almost could have kissed her after. It wouldn't have worked for the film.
Yeah.
But theoretically, he could have leant in and kissed her after knocking Biff out, and it would have all been in one revelatory moment.
Yeah, I think for the film itself, it just feels like you're adding another thing into for the sake of it. That's my only minor criticism. I say minor because I am nitpicking.
Yeah, I get it, but yeah, you'd have had to retool the third act a fair bit to avoid it, actually. But yeah,
it's only because that extra stipulation that the fact that they kissed at the dance.
Now they must have been very impressed by Marty's last 20 seconds of that song, because they're desperate for him to do another song, whereas for like the middle minute of that song, he was making weird twanging noises and looking like he was about to pass out.
He was like curled up in the corner, not playing it all.
I know, and then he went, "I can't play." But 20 seconds of competency, and they've gone, "Let's do another one."
Yeah, how about you sing on this?
Yeah, and I love the fact he goes, "This is an oldie." And then he tells them, and what I love is that he just tells them what like key it's in, and they're away. Perfect.
That's proper musician's boy, isn't it?
He plays Johnny B. Good, which is pretty cool. It's all right. The dancing's, it's all very cool. I kind of like this.
Yeah, I mean, look, even if you think it's a bit cheesy, I think the film's like earned the right at this point.
And also, you do need to take a breath between what we've just seen and the conclusion of Marty's
arc. Yes.
If you'd gone straight from that to, right, I'm jumping in with DeLorean, it would be, it needs that break. So you don't need it, but you kind of do need it. And it was one of those things they did nearly cut. And yet it's quite an iconic part of the film. So I'm glad it's here.
Yeah, I mean, I think, for its fault, I mean, I always think what Doc says later on, when he realised he didn't tear up the note. That's another thing we didn't talk about, was the fact that Doc actually watching a video back over saying like, they found me.
I don't know how, but he's found me, and you don't actually get any no real comments made about that going forward. But a few times during the film, Marty tries to tell him, and he won't have it. You mustn't know too much about your own future.
No.
The way that eventually it ends up with him sat in a diner just before the dance, writing it to him in a letter. At that, and he slides it into a pocket of the thing covering the DeLorean, and then it's forgotten about until right near the end.
Yeah. So the later one where he goes, "What the hell?" That's kind of how I feel. You just got to go, what the hell? And yeah, so we get that whole scene where I think Becca says with the Family Guy episodes. It's the episode where they go back to the 80s.
I don't think I've seen it.
And Brian, it's basically Brian, and he does "Never Gonna Give You Up" on the keyboard.
Oh, hang on, that rings a bell. I might have seen it. I might have seen that bit. Anyway,
the sole reason why I love that parody so much is the reaction, how like in Back to the Future, everyone's fucking loving Johnny B. Good. And then it's only when he gets like a bit
in dances. Yeah, it's really
when he gets a bit out of it, you're like kind of like stood there shocked, and it's just the reaction in Family Guy. Just, you see this one voice from the crowd going, "I wasn't enjoying that at all." It's like,
I hate it.
so that's bit always makes me laugh. Which bit? And then we get Marty dashing to the town square.
He's late as well, which is a theme through the film anyway, but it's exacerbated by the fact that he had to stay to do another song. Basically, that's what's caused this.
Yeah, and it's like it kind of no time to sort of set everything up, because the wind sort of breaks the cable, and I love the sequence. It's so tense and so. It's timed almost to perfection,
and it also homages one of the great scenes of early cinema. Harold Lloyd hanging off the hands of the clock.
It really does.
In a film called Safety Last.
Christopher Lloyd hanging off the face of a clock.
That's basically homaging that. That's where they got the idea from, anyway.
That's very clever. It's a really, unless you're not familiar with the history of cinema, very few will get that callback.
And also just the bit before
just to interject, just to say, it doesn't matter if you don't get it either. It's just added flavour if you do. Yeah,
it's also the bit where when they say goodbye when he's getting in the car, there's the element of almost like suddenly he knows no, you're not going to be there.
It's beautifully acted for a film that's comedy. Whenever I've seen other time travel films, and I mentioned it earlier, Hot Tub Time Machine, which no one's pretending is in the same league, and it's not to its detriment that it isn't, but you don't get this range of flavour. You don't get, they do the funny bits okay, and this film does the funny bits okay, but it's got real heart as well. And that's what, likens it to It's a Wonderful Life. You've seen an alternative world, which we'll see even more of in 2. But it's got a real heart in it, and almost almost like a nostalgia within the film for wanting things back as they were. So
they have a hug. He rips up the note. He realizes that he sort of tells him off again. It's one of his strong rules. So obviously this is you imagine Michael J. Fox or Marty just sort of being like, "Fuck! Oh, there's no time. Oh, for fuck's sake!" And also, he has to go, and so a little bit upset about emotions are running high at the moment. So, and meanwhile,
but again, they are up against, and it's a very clever thing to be able to do within a time travel story, because Terminator Genesis fucked this up. In Terminator Genesis, and I'm presuming we'll cover the Terminator films one day, but you've got we must get to the future as soon as possible. And it's that makes no sense on so many levels. So it's very difficult to have a ticking clock in a time travel film, and they've managed it here perfectly.
Oh yeah, because it only be at one point when they can actually do it.
Yes.
So
because of the lightning.
Yes, yeah, it's a smart plot device. So yeah, the Marty's actually sort of just left to kind of stay in the car and accelerate at a certain point, and you left to Christopher Lloyd basically doing the main heroics. When it comes to like sort of sliding down a rope and just getting to like plug the wire in just in time.
Yeah.
Which I think is just beautiful.
It's the bit where he pulls on it and it pulls out and he looks down and notices the other end's gone. It's the bit where he just goes, "Oh!" He does that earlier when he's showing him how it's going to work on the model and the bin catches fire.
Yeah.
That's really funny as well, his reaction there.
Damn.
It's like Becca's reaction when you say you don't like something. But yeah, that's all of the plot from now on, really, isn't it? That it's basically Doc trying to get all that done in time. It is done in time. He does catch he catches the cable that's sort of stretched across the sort of road, and he's got to hit it. Yeah, and he's transported back to the time, and he drives into the cinema where the Gremlins are watching that film.
Is it the same one?
Yeah, the Gremlins is shot on the Universal backlot as well. So if you see the opening credits of Gremlins, you're looking down at the square of Hill Valley, but with a matte painting over the top of it to make it look slightly different. But they go to the cinema at one point, and it's that cinema that's at the end of that road in this film, yeah.
And then he bumps into a tramp. The car won't start again.
He bumps into red. This is California Raisins paid for a product placement, and it's basically the bench with the bum laying on.
And and then you see the delivery terrorist sort of drive past him.
Yeah, he does actually he has set it back 10 minutes before, actually, just before he set off.
Yeah.
Because he was so upset he couldn't get to talk to Doc. But the car breaks down again, because the car's been breaking down all the way through again. Everything in this film is trailed perfectly. And he gets to Lone Pine Mall as it now ends. But again, if you don't notice that, you don't miss anything. It's now Lone Pine Mall. And he gets there just as Doc is shot. And he actually watches himself go back.
And see the Living Terrors just crash into something. Yeah. Which always makes me sort of a little bit like, wouldn't you be a little bit concerned about the two actual armed terrorists?
Yeah, because that didn't look like it would kill. It did. I mean, you could get injured, but it didn't strike me as something that would kill anyone, except for some sort of very freak contact.
Yeah, I mean, usually in movie law, you have to the vehicle has to explode for you to assume everyone's dead.
Yeah, rest of the time they just get out and sort of shake their head a bit.
Yeah. But yeah, no. So Marty runs to Doc and goes, "No, Doc, no."
Oh, bollocks!
And then he just magically gets up and he's wearing a bulletproof vest. And one of my thoughts is like, what if they shot you in the face?
Yeah.
Which is dumb and dumber quote, really. And it sort of turned out that he put the letter back together again because he thought, fuck it.
Well, at that point, there comes a point where if you're warning somebody all week that you shouldn't be knowing these things, and they're still desperate to tell you and agitated about it, you can imagine that eventually you might think, "No, there's got to be something here I need to know."
There was a little bit I've noticed. There was like something that Doc pointed out before he went back into the 80s. He sort of he mentioned something about like, oh yeah, he picked on the fact that something was slightly different. And he was like, oh, never mind.
Yeah, it was the fact that he's telling him that he laid Biff right out. And he said he's never stood up to Biff like that. And Doc goes, never? And then it's like, Marty says, yeah, why? And it's like, nothing. And it's just like, we can't go into it now. Doc is clearly realising Marty might go back to a slightly different man now.
Yeah.
That's the implication.
Yeah, it's like he changed future, but it's too late now. We can't.
But again, set up and pay off, because it's paid off in a minute at that point. But again, if you don't notice it, you don't notice it.
And also at the dance, he gets one. He's kind of become almost like popular now because it's like, oh, he's punched out the biggest dick in high school.
You should run for class president.
Yeah, he's Mr. Popular now. soon we go from Doc.
Marty's taken home by Doc.
Yeah.
To his home. He's given a lift home.
Yeah, not to his home because that's where he
let's
fucked
go
him.
home and celebrate. So they've cheated down, so they're going to celebrate with their penises. That's not what I meant.
Doc, I never believed those rumors about you being a pedophile. Those weren't rumors, Marty.
Anyway, Marty goes to bed. The other thing is he's dropped home so late because this all happened at like 1:30 in the morning or so. So by the time he's dropped off, Marty hasn't got time to see anything of the house.
Yeah.
He sees his room, that's it.
And then he wakes up and then something's a little bit different. His brother and sister are wearing smart clothes.
They've got soft furnishings.
Yes.
Hang on, we need a woman to give its furniture. Becca, thoughts?
Soft furnishings.
There you go. That's the hard-hitting opinion from Andrews.
Andrew's soft furnishings. Furnishing corner. And so it's established that, why are you in a suit? I always wear a suit to the office.
Yeah, so what do we see immediately? The house is nicer.
Mm-hmm.
Very 80s, I mean it is, but it's nicer, it's more homely. Very dark at the start of the film, isn't it? I know it's daytime now and that was night, but it was all very cheap and mismatched and tacky for what we saw of it in the first part of the film. So it's now all colour coordinated, quite smart. Dave and Linda are having breakfast. They're both dressed smartly. Dave is in a suit, and he's going to the office.
Isn't it a Saturday though? That's what I'm confused. Like,
yeah. He breaks. He hasn't actually got a job. He just breaks into one at the weekend and tries to look busy. Linda, having at the start of the film saying, "How am I ever supposed to meet anyone?" is taking numerous calls from blokes, Greg or Craig,
because she's a looker.
Well, she's confident now.
Yeah, I guess.
Stuff.
So there, we've not seen the guys that could be right muffed.
Mufters?
There's a word I've not heard before. What does that mean?
I think Chris has just made up a word there. So you got mingers if it's a woman who's ugly, but an ugly man is now. It's now.
I've never heard of that colloquialism before.
That's because we've just made it up.
Well, I figured, well, you know.
Women go to a bar, they order themselves a wanked off, not fingered, and try and meet a mufter.
Or is that just locally to Manchester?
No, definitely not. So yeah. And his mum and dad come back and they're just from playing tennis.
Yeah. And the thing is as well, this is one of the things, they kept falling out with Crispin Glover. Crispin argued tooth and nail not to wear this. He wanted his look to be totally different and his hair straight up and to be wearing a vest and, really strange guy. But yeah, they're both aging a lot better. She is noticeably slimmer with better skin, albeit it's prosthetics. Mm. They're active and they do things together. And again, set up payoff. Earlier in the film, what do your parents like to do together? Nothing. At this point, now they're out and about. Now, we will have problems when we get to sequels, because in the early 70s, he was a famous author in the sequels. And here in 1985, his first book is being published. We find out he's now going up to the left.
Oh, yeah, because he never liked anyone. His stories, he didn't like anyone to read his stories in case anyone didn't like him.
Now he's gone for it and he's been published. I'm assuming he's done better professionally in this. So his money. Yeah. I always thought, how did he make money as an author and how was he famous? Well, that is a fault in the sequels. But here, no one's saying he's got greater wealth particularly, but he's doing better at work. He's got a BMW. Marty still thinks the car's been totaled, but it's outside and it's a BMW, and Biff is polishing it.
Mm. Biff, completely different.
I mean the car. I don't mean he sat out the. I didn't mean that as a euphemism. Biff's not outside having a wank.
But Biff's literally got completely just
Still looks like Donald Trump, but is very
He's in a velvet. He's in a velvet tracksuit, and he's just happy to be here. He's Mr. Friendly. He's he's there doing favours for George now.
He's still got aggression, but he's frightened of George, and he's basically the McFly's bitch now.
Yeah.
And he comes in a bit later going, your first book's been published.
Oh, hey, Marty.
Yeah. And it's basically based on the whole business of Marty being an alien, and that it even is an image of him on the front. Looks like him. On the back, George looks totally different, but that was an earlier makeup test.
Right.
He was meant to look different in this. And that's it, isn't it? Other than he goes...
he meets Jennifer again.
He's told to go outside.
Stuff in the car because Marty still thinks...
He's been bought the 4x4.
Yeah.
And while he's celebrating that, it's how about a ride, mister? You bet your ass, he says. Or something like that.
Because we're going to a camp where we will fuck.
We're going to fuck all night. But just then, the DeLorean arrives.
Yeah. Doc comes like all in strange clothes.
He's wearing
a see-through tie.
Bright red and bright yellow with a see-through tie, and basically what looks like aluminium on his face. In reality, the actor couldn't see through that at all, but it's meant to be like sunglasses. And we find out in the second one they're high tech as well, because he's got his like heads-up display and all the rest of it on it. We'll get to that next week.
And something's got to be done about your kids.
Yeah. And then they set off, and where we're going, we don't need roads, and the DeLorean can now fly. It doesn't need plutonium anymore. It can run on trash, which is effectively a coffee maker that they put it in as a prop on there. And that was only ever meant to be a joke. That was it in credits, but that was only ever meant to be a joke. There was never a sequel in mind.
No. I mean, to me, that works as an ending. I like that. I mean, I like that as a one-off.
And off they go to their for more adventures, and that's it.
Yeah. It's more of a what ending, really. It's kind of like, which I like.
I've got mixed feelings because I like plenty about the sequels, and I find the second one absolutely fascinating. But at the same time, there is a small part of me that wishes this was the only one.
Yeah.
Yeah, same here as well.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I
if it was just a one-off, it'd be perfect, wouldn't it? But I mean, I didn't see that the sequels spoil it as such, because they add more to the mythos and to the world.
But they're
of the
way
film.
more cartoonish than this.
Yeah, definitely.
I'll go first on final thoughts. I don't have a lot to add because I've done obviously probably the bulk of the talking through this, and I've said quite a lot as we go through it. The script is as tight as any script I've ever seen. The acting is all pitch perfect. So many of the visuals in it are iconic. I think this is the best film of the 1980s, and that's all I'm going to say.
And not
so much
Die
more than
Hard.
that.
No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, not Die Hard, not Octopussy, not Superman, not... I don't know.
A View to a Kill?
Bueller, not...
Wanker.
Not... Breakfast Club, not 16 Candles, not...
You don't have to name every film of the 1980s.
E.T.
Not Top Gun, not...
There's plenty of great films. E.T.'s a great film, and I'm not arguing.
Raiders, not...
Well, the problem is, how can you name Raiders the best film of the 80s when, yes, it might be the best of the four, but I actually prefer the third one without necessarily thinking it's a better film. If there was a sequel to this that I didn't think was as good but liked it more, I wouldn't be calling this the best film of the 80s.
No, I mean it's very subjective, isn't it? It's to each their own, really.
Of course, but I mean, I don't think I've encountered a better script than this.
No. And
I would say it's certainly one of the best films we've ever covered.
Certainly.
Final thought. Okay, I'll go next. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I'm with Dave. It's one of my favourite films. It's something kind of magical. It's not perfect. It's not an ounce of fat, and I think when it comes to film criticism, not enough gets talked about sometimes when a film is so lean. Like, it doesn't waste it. It's got a really nice 90-minute or under 2 hours running time, and it just flows and has every scene means something. And I don't think that really gets talked about enough. We hear a lot of stuff about being baggy and overlong, but when I think
it's one of the tragedies, Chris, when directors get more successful.
Yeah.
Because James Cameron, when you go back to like The Terminator, perfect lean film. and now his films are getting longer and longer and longer. And with the exception of Dunkirk, it's been happening to Nolan for years as well. You're absolutely right. There's not enough. And now that's not to say a film like Justice League comes out and I think it's too short. You know, it is horses for courses, but it's not how long the film is, it's how it uses its running time. And this film is exactly the length it needs to be, almost to the second.
Yeah. I can't really fault it at all, really. I think the performances are great. It's got a really good heart to it. It's funny. It's universal. Like, it's so easy to watch. Like, I showed this to my niece and my nephews. Just out of like, just to kind of like just to see if they liked it or not, and yeah, they really enjoyed it. In fact, I sort of because I bought the Blu-ray and I was like, I wanted to get rid of the DVD, so I figured, well, if they like the first one, I'll just give them the DVD box set they can just have. So I just gave it to them because it's like the first one so much. So yeah, I think it's great. I think it is a classic in all manner of respects. I think it's held up now today. And I think it will stand the test of time quite easily. I think it has done already. Before
we are out of time, I can't really add much more to what's been said already. Yeah, so, definitely one of the top films of the 80s, and really one of the top films of all time. As this film has everything: like action, comedy, suspense, thrills, laughs. It's perfect. As I say, yeah, it's kind of a little hour and a half, 2 hours, but none of that is wasted at all. It zips along at a brilliant pace, and it's so iconic and so far-reaching and so influential, not just in terms of like the Spielberg's reach, upon sort of like comedy, action, thriller, sci-fi, time travel, just any kind of genre of cinema really, and it's been endlessly parodied and ruled, and just loved by filmmakers the world over.
It didn't sound like you do the thing as well. Well, the ending of it says something's got to be done about your kids.
Exactly. If I'm like, I've had a go at Simpsons, I've had a go at Rick and Morty. It's what you've got to look at.
Well, Reagan used "Where we're going, we don't need roads" in the State
exactly. Even American presidents have been influenced by it, and likewise as well, as we've seen with Biff and Uncanny Trump. Impressions, as we've seen go on, and as we'll see next week as well. It's just one of my all-time favourite movies, definitely.
I don't know much about it though, which is bollocks. I know loads about it, but I've got a queue in fun facts. Becca.
Fun facts. Fun fact number one. A lot of these we've already touched upon. Michael J. Fox and Bruce McGregor are actually nearly the same age, despite playing father and son. I think it's like 4 or 5 years between them.
Yeah, but to be fair, like the bit when he actually is older there's prosthetic work, and they're supposed to be like the same age anyway when they go back.
Exactly. Yeah, I just think I always find it a bit funny, but obviously he with his good, useful genes, he always looks good. Fun fact number 2: Lorraine was named for Roy Scheider's wife in Jaws. Fun fact number 3.
Hang on, just to explain that one, they didn't go, let's name her after.
Oh no.
Lorraine Gary's in Jaws.
No.
What it is Sid Sheinberg wanted changes, including Spaceman from Pluto, and the whole thing of the whole thing about the chimp and all the rest of it. He wanted to change the character to Lorraine. Because his wife was Lorraine Gary, and we know Lorraine Gary as Roy Scheider, as the character as the actress who played Roy Scheider's wife.
So you know Lorraine Gary as Roy Scheider, really?
In the Jaws films.
In the Joys of Jaws. Fun fact number 3: according to Bob Gale,
that would be a shark sex manual. The Joy of Jaws. Go on.
With our model Ken Ford. Yeah, Ken Ford there. Sorry. Harry Hill reference.
Yeah, I've got the reference.
Fun fact number 3: according to Bob Gale, Johnny Depp auditioned for the role of Marty, but apparently he didn't create a very memorable impression. Yeah. Fun fact number 4: Lee Thompson.
I can't imagine Johnny Depp doing that. Just be
no,
like,
I can't either.
It would just be like, well, dark. It would just be like too sort of like drawly and.
Yeah, or Keith, what's his face? Pirates. Yeah, that's one. Keith Lemon. No.
Go on.
Fun fact number 4: Lee Thompson spent 3 hours on makeup to look 47 as Mrs. McFly. Fun fact number 5, as of June 2008. This film ranks number 10 in the AFI American Film Institute's top 10 sci-fi movies.
All right, so we're underway with the new series. Social media, folks.
You can find me at Cinetroics on Twitter. My website is cinetroics.co.uk, where you find this lovely podcast, and not much else.
all of the other prolific output.
Yeah, no, I'll probably end up like...
So basically, if you want to hear Chris on another show but this, go to the Cinematronics website, have a quick look at that, and then download Smorgasbord from... Yeah.
Or you can download the last episode where me and Dave ended up talking about movies.
Yeah, you can find me at ThePastyKid1976 on Twitter.
And you can follow us on Twitter at They Expect Us to Talk, on Facebook.com/expectedtalk. You can also find us on YouTube if you search for Do You Expect Us to Talk, and you can also find us on iTunes and Stitcher. On iTunes if you search Do You Expect Us to Talk, and give us a 5-star glowing review. Thank you very much.
A glowing view.
Saying we is amazing.
Not a bright or lit up view, just glowing would be fine.
Just glowing. Warm glowing, hopefully. I mean, gushing if you're really going to push the boat out.
Squirting.
Pardon? Squirting.
Squirting or gushing, we're fine with both.
And ejaculating view.
I wasn't quite sure then.
Ejaculating.
Squirt out.
However you want to phrase your review.
Just ensure generally that it is overall positive.
Okay, well, despite our strange recording schedule, our next show is Becca.
Do you expect to talk or return with Back to the Future Part 2?